Bitcoin runs out at every price. Eventually, all the sellers at every single Bitcoin price will run out. One Bitcoin is literally worth infinity US dollars. One Satoshi is worth infinity US dollars. Nobody will want dollars for Bitcoin because Bitcoin is the asset that can't be created out of thin air, while the US dollar can be. And it'll keep going until the US dollar can't stop losing. It's guaranteed to lose. It's guaranteed to trend to zero forever. To me, that's crazy. Every time Michael Saylor buys Bitcoin, he eliminates thousands of whole coiners. Bitcoin's price goes to $1 million within the next.
Rajat, you are famous for saying numerous things, but some of the things that I've had in my mind recently are Bitcoin runs out at every price. And also, every Bitcoin price is a rounding error. Could you please explain in only the way you can what you mean when you are constantly telling and exposing that to the world?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first one, Bitcoin runs out at every price. That's supposed to be a reference to the fact that Bitcoin's price is determined at the margin, and over time, the people who are willing to sell at certain prices will eventually run out. So what you'll see is, let's say 15 years ago, Bitcoin's price was a penny, right? And how many people are you going to find that are willing to sell their Bitcoin to for a penny today? Probably none, right? A couple years later, one Bitcoin cost $1, $10, $100. And again, eventually those prices ran out. And now you can't find anybody who's willing to sell you Bitcoin for those prices because the Bitcoin is rotated into other holders who buy at higher prices. Their cost basis is higher. So somebody who bought Bitcoin at 100K, they're not going to sell it to you for 10 cents. They'd rather just hold on to it and watch it go to zero, right? So that 10-cent price is gone. The $1 price is gone. The $10 price is gone. The $100 price. Eventually, we'll see that for 100,000. I don't know if that's already happened. I don't know if the $100,000 sellers are gone, but who knows? Maybe in 4 years we see that we have. So let's say Bitcoin's price goes to $1 million within the next 4 years. I don't know if that'll happen. I'm not even predicting that that'll happen. I don't know if that could happen, but let's say it goes to $1 million and then it comes back down. At that point, if Bitcoin doesn't go below 100K, you know that it's probably never going to go below 100K again. So over time, the sellers at every price run out because now the demand is basically infinite. There's companies buying thousands of Bitcoin every week, hundreds of Bitcoin every week. Eventually, you're going to see that the announcements are going to be for 10 Bitcoin, for 1 Bitcoin, for 90 million Satoshis, 70 million Satoshis, 50 million Satoshis. They're going to be making announcements on Twitter saying like the same thing that Michael Saylor has been saying. There was one announcement he made where they bought something like 50,000 Bitcoin or something crazy like that. And eventually you're going to see people are saying we bought 50,000 Satoshis. So what that means is the number of people who are willing to sell their Bitcoin for dollars at every single price, eventually there will be none left. Nobody will want dollars for Bitcoin because Bitcoin is the asset that can't be created out of thin air, while the US dollar can be. You can keep creating more and more US dollars at any time. You can keep satisfying demand for US dollars. So whenever somebody wants to sell their Bitcoin for dollars, if they wait a year, they wait 2 years, wait 5 years, they're probably going to get more dollars for that Bitcoin. And over time, we're seeing, if we look at the charts, you see higher highs, higher lows. Something that a lot of people seem to not believe is that Bitcoin can consistently keep its returns at these levels, so 50, 60, 70%. But I think they're looking at it the wrong way. I think they're looking at it as Bitcoin's price is going to go too high. But I think you have to flip your perspective, where you have to look at how low the US dollar's value can go. Instead of looking at Bitcoin, you have to look at the US dollar value. So once you realize that the US dollar can go lower and lower, it can lose 99% today, then it can lose another 99% tomorrow, then it can lose another 99% the next day, then the next day, then the next day. It can keep going. There's no floor. There's no zero. As long as people are willing to accept US dollars for goods and services, it will have value, but that value can keep eroding away until it's worth a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of what it's worth today. But what that means is that Bitcoin's price will continue to rise and rise, but it'll rise much faster than the US dollar loses value, because the the value of Bitcoin is also going to absorb value, the value of stocks, of real estate, of bonds, of everything that's being used as a store of value today, because Bitcoin is the best store of value. And eventually, what we're going to see is people are directly exchanging their Bitcoin for goods and services, and for time, and for labor, right? And people are being paid in Bitcoin. And today, you can earn something like 30,000 satoshis an hour, 15,000 satoshis an hour, whatever your income is. At that point, you'll be earning 30 satoshis an hour, 15 satoshis an hour. I think that at some point we're going to see, and this is now let's go to the second statement. I think that eventually every single price in terms of US dollars is going to be a rounding error, because we're going to see that Bitcoin's price is rising by, okay, so right now we see Bitcoin's price rise $1,000 every couple hours. It falls $1,000, but a few years ago, people wouldn't even be able to imagine Bitcoin being at $1,000, right? So today we have Bitcoin's price at $120,000. At some point, we won't be able to imagine the base being $120,000, because the daily movements, the fluctuations, the hour by hour fluctuations are going to be $120,000. So that's what I mean there. At some point, let's say when Bitcoin's $10 million, $120,000 will be a rounding error. When Bitcoin is $100 million, $10 million will be a rounding error. When Bitcoin is $1 billion, $100 million will be a rounding error, and so on. And it'll keep going until nobody's willing to sell their Bitcoin for US dollars anymore.
That's going to be an interesting day. That will be a very interesting day. What
Very interesting.
we were just talking offline a little bit about this, and you talk to a lot of people, a lot of, you go to conferences, or it's online, or it's comments on YouTube, or it's friends and family, and it's, I'm too late. I missed the boat. And, is it unit count bias? Is it just, kind of the education we've had for decades and decades, generation after generation, of just believing this? Like I just saw Luke Groman tweet, and he was talking about was talking about some, meme coins and all this stuff. And he was like, yeah, like when you have the risk-free, uh, you know, asset, in the US, treasury, and no one really believes in it anymore, of course you're gonna have meme coins going to the moon and things like that. And I always think of people that we've been preparing for a war. Like, you've just been learning the tactics and the movements and the vehicles and the armament and the weaponry and all these different things, but no one ever has to stop and be like, hey, well, why are we at war in the first place? We just, like, everyone starts on like first base or second base, and it's just like, I just assume like this is the right direction. No one asked, like, well, what is money? Like, what, the dividends, yields, and all these things. No one ever asked and zoomed out to ask, what is this, what's the real question? What's the root cause of all these things? Why are we doing this? So, like, will the average person, will they win with Bitcoin? If you're starting now, I mean, how does, even if you don't start now, if you say you start 10 years from now, like, how will Bitcoin change society and even help, maybe say, the poor and the middle class? Even if you're not in Bitcoin, you don't get in for another 10 years. Like, what does this world look like as we transition?
I think as long as you're able to sell your US dollars and exchange them for Bitcoin, I think you're still early, or not even just US dollars, any fiat currency. I think you're still early. If there's a US dollar exchange rate, the US dollar can be created out of nothing. Clearly, that means that people haven't figured out that the US dollar is way less valuable than Bitcoin. The way that I see it, one Bitcoin is literally worth infinity US dollars. One Satoshi is worth infinity US dollars, because like I said, the US dollar can be created out of nothing. They can print more. Like, if you think that you're too late, and, like, even, let's say, for example, somebody like Dave Ramsey, we were talking about Dave Ramsey before, he probably thinks he's too late, because he had a tweet, or he had a video from 2018 where he was saying that people who are buying Bitcoin are stupid, right? People who are using their student loan money to buy Bitcoin are idiots. But that's basically what he was saying in one of these videos. So he probably thinks he's too late. But I posted something about him ignoring Bitcoin for a very long time, and at the time, I posted it in, let's see, I posted that tweet. Oh, here it is. I posted that tweet on December 25th, 2024. So how long ago was that? That was 8 months, 7 months, 7 months ago. So on that day, so he has, let's say, $600 million worth of real estate. Let's say his equity, I think his equity is actually $600 million. So he has $600
Mhm.
million. His equity is 600 because he doesn't take on debt. That's what he claims. Um, so if his equity is $600 million at the time, he would have been able to buy 6,000 Bitcoin. In 7 months, he can only afford 5,000. So he went from 6,000 to 5,000. He lost $1,000 worth, 1,000 Bitcoin worth of wealth in 7 months. 7 months. That's crazy. 7 months.
That's wild.
So 7 months, he lost 1,000 Bitcoin, $100 million worth of wealth. If he had exchanged his real estate for Bitcoin at that time, I know he couldn't do it all at once. Of course, I'm not even saying that, but I'm just saying theoretically, if he had exchanged all of his real estate for Bitcoin, he would have had 6,000 Bitcoin. He would have been one of the biggest entities in the world owning Bitcoin. So when people think that, oh, I'm too late, I actually got a comment of somebody saying there's no point of buying zero point 0.1 Bitcoin. When Bitcoin is at $400,000, your zero point 0.1 Bitcoin will only be worth 40,000. When Bitcoin is 300,000, your 0.1 Bitcoin will only be worth 30,000. But why are we stopping at 300 or 400,000? It's literally going up forever. And I'm not even trying to use just something that's been used so often. It's literally going up forever because the
Yep.
US dollar
It's not
can't
hyperbole.
stop losing. The
Yeah.
US dollar can't stop losing. It's guaranteed to lose. It's guaranteed to trend to zero forever. You've already seen it lose like 99% of its value in terms of gold in the last 100 years. 99, yeah, 99%. And in terms of Bitcoin, it's lost even more. Even if we say, let's say Bitcoin didn't start at zero, let's say it started at $1. It's now up, what, 9,900, 99,000%? Is that what it is? Whatever the percentage is.
Yep.
It's up a lot. And the US dollar has lost a lot of value compared to Bitcoin. And it can keep going. It can keep losing value literally forever. So if you think that you're too late, and today, let's say today you can afford 0.1 Bitcoin, it's going to cost you 12 grand. Let's say you can afford, 0.1 Bitcoin. Eventually, that 12 grand will only buy 0.08 Bitcoin. Then it'll buy 0.06. Then it'll buy 0.05. At some point, that 0.1 Bitcoin that you bought today will be the equivalent of a house. And how many people can just pay cash for a house today? Not many. So when you think of it from the perspective, when you think of it from that example of Dave Ramsey, where I said he could have bought 6,000 Bitcoin, but now he can only get 5,000. Eventually, it'll go to 4,000. Eventually, it'll go to 400. Eventually, he'll only be able to buy 40 Bitcoin with his entire real estate portfolio. I know that sounds ridiculous. I know most people think that, oh, that's just crazy. How would that even happen? How is it possible that he'll lose 99% of his wealth? He will, because Bitcoin is finite. Bitcoin runs out at every price. Eventually, his housing portfolio is going to be a rounding error compared to the price of one Bitcoin. And that's not going to end. That's going to keep going. It'll keep going until, let's say, at some point, his bloodline will lose value in terms of Bitcoin until at some point, let's say the real estate portfolio is passed on to his kids or his grandkids, and they sell their portfolio for Bitcoin. That's finally when they'll be able to lock in their wealth. Before that, they'll keep losing and losing and losing until, they have zero Bitcoin worth of wealth.
Yeah, it's so
It's brutal.
Yeah, like I want to go a couple of different angles here from this, but
Yeah.
you just made me think of something else actually as well. Like Dr. Jeff Ross would always, I don't know, like 2020 or 21. I'm trying to think. I remember like one of the first times I was ever on a Spaces with him. He was saying, you got to measure your wealth in Bitcoin, not just fiat, but you have to measure it in Bitcoin as well. And then I started doing it after that. And boy, oh boy, is it one of the most alarming, awake, illuminating things you can do, because you just see like you have this, whatever it is amount you have, and then it just dwindles over time in Bitcoin terms, right? Like your net worth in fiat, you're like, oh, we're doing better. Like things are going great. But then like you just see it going down and down and down in Bitcoin terms. And it's like that spark that someone needs to say, oh my goodness, like I have to get into Bitcoin right away, because I'm going to keep losing. To your point, like I might have 600 million or $1 billion in these fiat assets, but you're going to continue losing in terms of Bitcoin if you don't make that jump. so I want to segue really quick, or like, sorry, not tangent. And I want to talk about the properties of Bitcoin, because Lynn Alden, someone recently just had that tweet that went viral. That guy, James or whoever, he was like, I just don't get Bitcoin. It's like the dumbest people on earth. And they just think it's going to go up in value. And that's like the best argument for it. And she's like, no, like going up is just people saying, hey, this is a great, asset to be in. But the argument for it is the properties for Bitcoin. And I feel like that's what gets glossed over a lot of times, because even as Bitcoiners, we make a lot of assumptions of, like, hey, this is just like, we're talking all these numbers and we know them to be true, because once you do the homework, it becomes very obvious. You see the wizard behind the curtain. But the average guy, we talked about this again offline a little bit, stocks, they go up 8 to 12% a year. It's the Dave Ramsey thing, everything. And you look at them and they're like, yeah, that's because the currency is getting debased at 8 to 12% a year. Like that's all that's happening. It's going sideways. And they look at you like you have 8 eyes. So the properties of Bitcoin, I try, it's like you almost wish you could keep naming it something else to a degree. Like Bitcoin has a different name every month because people have, it's like a 4-letter word. So I would love for you to just touch on, some of these different things, but even just the properties a little bit of why are we so confident that what we're saying is true and will happen, will play out, as Jeff Booth says, right? Like if it stays decentralized and secure, this will absolutely play out. So I would love for you to touch on kind of all this, because I think it's something that gets lost in the weeds a little bit of like, we just make these jumps, these assumptions that like the average person knows this and they don't. So I'd love your
Yeah.
thoughts on this.
Yeah, completely agree. I have a graphic that I posted on X a while ago, March 14th. These are basically the characteristics that we need money to have. I don't know about these ones, the verifiable supply, decentralized, unconfiscatable, but these are the actual functions of money that we need money to have. International, not really. I think that would come into portable. So these characteristics, let's say this one, scarce, um, portable, durable, divisible, fungible, um, and I think there's one more. But essentially, what's happening here is that Bitcoin is the only asset that has all of these characteristics. Before this, in the real, like in the physical world, we had gold, which had most of them, but it wasn't easy to move around. It wasn't very divisible. Think about how hard it would be if you had a gold bar and you wanted to go to a coffee shop. How hard would it be for you to transact? It'd be extremely difficult
Yeah.
if we just had gold. So because gold was so difficult to use, because gold was so difficult to move around, because it was so difficult to uh, cut into smaller pieces. If you had to go to if you went to a coffee shop and you tried to pay with gold, what would you do? You'd take a scale with you,
Yeah.
like a
Yep.
extremely precise scale, because you want to make sure that you don't lose any value. Um, you'd have to take a chisel with you to knock some gold off the bar. Like it would be crazy. Then they'd have to have really expensive material or really expensive equipment to actually test that gold, and then they'd have to find the market value, and then they'd have to give you a little bit of a loss on that, because they have to take their own cut, and they have to all that stuff would have to be accounted for. So instead of going that route, instead of going the route of having to use gold to transact, we started using fiat. So fiat is a way for us to have a form of money that's essentially a layer on top of gold, and that layer is portable and it's divisible, and it can be used much more easily. Those are the main advantages that fiat has over gold, but fiat isn't scarce. That's the issue. That's the main issue here. Fiat can do everything that gold can do. Obviously, it can't be used in industrial processes. It can't be, but I mean, as money, you can do everything with fiat that you can do with gold, but it's not scarce. So if you store it and you work hard and you do everything you can your entire life, there's this really great tweet where this guy he says people worked 40 years of their lives, and in 2 months the Fed printed like 50-60% of the money supply or something like that, and they just destroyed all of their purchasing power. That's the issue with fiat. I think what Bitcoin does is it combines all of the best features of gold, and it removes all of the bugs, which is mainly scarcity. It removes the scarcity. It removes the actually no. There's more bugs to fiat. Of course, it's not decentralized. It's confiscatable. Let's say, for example, Russia put their value into U.S. treasuries. They had $300 billion worth of treasuries, and the U.S. government sanctioned them, and they basically said your treasuries don't exist anymore. to stop them from invading Ukraine. I get it. Invading Ukraine is not a good thing. I'm not saying any of that. But what if they were doing something different? What if you're the one doing something and you think it's right, but they think it's wrong? Are you going to have to tiptoe around the US government's feelings your entire life to do anything? Why is it that the US government, why is it that nobody can stop the US government from doing the same things? And again, I'm not being crazy here. I'm not trying to say to you that, oh, you should go against the US government. Not at all. What I'm saying here is that the US government shouldn't have power over how other people spend their money, how they save, how they do all of that. So Bitcoin takes away the things that don't work for the US dollar. It takes all of the things that do work for gold. It and it packages it up into a digital form of money. And I've heard people call it a battery of sorts, where you put your energy into it, it stores it very well, and you can use it to transact in the future. That's what value is. Value is when you, in the future, you want to transact with someone, they'll accept what you have of value for what they have of value. They create something, let's say they create a product, you pay them with something of value, right? If you pay them with US dollars, let's say I let's say you work for me. Let's say you're an employee of mine. I'm paying you an hourly wage. I'm paying you in US dollars. I'm getting something from you that can't be replaced, but you're getting something from me that I can just borrow and it can be created out of nothing. So as an employer, let's say I have a massive bank or I have a massive building, I have some assets, I can go to the bank and I can borrow more dollars. They can create more dollars out of thin air and I can pay you with those dollars. On the other hand, you only have one life. You have to give me your energy. You have to give me your time. I'm paying you with something that can be literally printed. I can go to the bank and they can create more for me while you're giving me something that you can't print. You only have one. You only have one life. You can only be at one place at a time. So if you're paying me with your time and I'm paying you with pieces of paper, you're getting screwed completely. Unless you convert that into something else, unless you convert it into, let's say, real estate, gold. In the past, that's what it was. Unless now you convert it into Bitcoin, you're getting screwed. You have to convert it into something that has all of these characteristics of money. Otherwise, there's something happening at some point where your value is being taken from you. So, in the case of the US dollar, every time the US government prints more money, they're basically redistributing wealth from everybody who holds US dollars to themselves. Not they don't print money; they borrow money. Every time the Federal Reserve prints money, they're redistributing wealth from anybody who owns U.S. dollars. Let's say somebody in Nigeria. I have a friend who lives in Nigeria. He holds, or he used to hold U.S. dollars. His family holds U.S. dollars. People around him hold U.S. dollars. So every time the U.S. government borrows money, and every time the Federal Reserve prints money to fund the U.S. government's spending, the people in Nigeria who get no benefit from the US government spending are the ones footing the bill. That's because the US dollar is not scarce. So if we bring it all back, you asked why should people own? I think that's what your question was. Why should people own Bitcoin over everything else? It's because Bitcoin is the only thing that has all these characteristics. Nothing else has these characteristics. If we try to create something else with these characteristics, of course we can try. We have multiple altcoins that are trying to do that. The issue is that, I mean, number one, there's the network. Number two, the network effect, which is the users, like the savers in Bitcoin, the people who spend their Bitcoin, the people who accept their Bitcoin, the merchants, the miners. Who else is in the network? The people who run nodes. They're usually the people who save in Bitcoin. So you have that network, and it's growing and growing and growing. And I think the last step for this network to become really, really massive is the merchants. The merchants are the hardest part to get because you have to convince people to actually accept Bitcoin, and then you have to convince them to accept Bitcoin for the things that they create of value. So the merchants are the hardest part to get for Bitcoin, and we're finally approaching that. We're finally getting to that point. So at some point, let's say, for example, if McDonald's starts accepting Bitcoin, Walmart starts accepting Bitcoin. I don't know if that'll happen. I don't know when that'll happen. At some point, I think it would. But when that happens, that's when you know that this thing is going global. Like not even global, it's going crazy. Like it's going. We're in hyper Bitcoinization. We're in Bitcoinization. That's what you know at that point. When Walmart starts accepting it, they have Lightning terminals. When McDonald's allows you to pay for your burgers with Lightning, or whatever is the layer two at that point, that's when you know that people have finally started really appreciating Bitcoin's value as the only form of money in the world that has all these characteristics. And we've tried and tried over and over again for thousands of years to recreate the scarcity of gold. For example, we started using shells, we started using teeth, we were using salt for a bit, but nothing can recreate gold's characteristics. The only thing that could really recreate them was Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the scarce. It's the discovery of digital scarcity. It's the discovery of something not being plentiful. Nothing else. Like that's the easiest way to say it, right? Nothing else can step into that role. Even houses. People save in houses today. They save in index funds. Keep in mind, index funds can be printed. Stock. We're seeing MicroStrategy do that with their shares. They keep printing more shares. They dump them on the market. They buy Bitcoin with the proceeds. More houses can be built. They take time, effort, and energy. And one of the reasons why house prices keep going up is because it takes time, effort, and energy to create a house, while to create the dollars to buy that house, there's basically no price. It's free. For the people who have wealth, it's free. Like if you have a house and you borrow against that house, you can now buy another house. You can borrow more money to buy that house. Then if you have another house, you can borrow money to buy even more houses. You can keep going. That's why the housing prices are so off. So okay, now so you asked why Bitcoin, and then you asked what are the downstream effects. Think about it this way: if people stop, okay, number one, people stop using gold as a store of value, it'll be used in more industrial processes. It'll be more plentiful to use. It'll be cheaper because people are no longer hoarding as much of it as they can in their vaults, in their safe at home. Now they can they can sell that gold, they can exchange it for Bitcoin, and then now whoever's buying it can put it into whatever kind of innovation. And I think that'll probably boost technology very quickly. Just that alone. We'll be able to do things that we never were able to do before. And keep in mind, I'm not an expert on this. This is just me talking about the things that I've read. I don't know too much about it, but I think just that one thing is going to change a lot, right? And then the next thing here, real estate. I think that's probably not the biggest thing. I think the real estate is the biggest thing. Right now, people are buying as many houses as they can, and they keep buying houses and they keep buying houses, even though they don't need them. I don't know if you know this, Brandon, but the number of unoccupied houses in the U.S. is 10%. 10% of all houses in the U.S. are unoccupied. So something like 150 million houses are in the U.S. 15 million of them, 10 to 15 million of them, that's the estimate. 10 to 15 million of them are unoccupied. To me, that's crazy. What would happen if those 10 to 15% of houses went on the market? What would happen if the people who own land
prices start coming down? Yeah. Yep.
Right? What would happen if people who own land no longer want to own that land anymore? Because a lot of people. So I have a friend who's a financial advisor. He works with a guy who's extremely wealthy. He has something like 900 acres of land, and all he's doing with it is he's sitting on it because he expects the value to go up. That's it. He's not doing anything with it. What he does is he borrows against it. So he has a very, very low loan to value ratio. So no matter what happens, he's going to be able to continue. He's going to be able to continue supporting his lifestyle with that real estate. The value of the real estate will keep going up in terms of dollars. So he'll never really have to pay back the loan. And he has this land. He's hoarding this land, and he's going to pass it on to his kids. Then he's going to pass it on to his grandkids. Eventually, somebody will realize that they don't want to hold on to the land anymore. They don't want to deal with all the law, the regulations that go around it, having to borrow money against it. They don't have to worry about all that. They can just get rid of it. They don't have to have that headache anymore, and they can just buy Bitcoin with it. So what's going to happen? We're going to see that there's more houses. I think Bitcoin is also going to make it so that entrepreneurs have more of an incentive to create the things that we need. Right now, okay, let's say that people are right and we don't have enough housing. At some point, if there is actually not enough housing, at some point we're going to see, let's say, 3D printed houses or prefabricated homes made in factories, and they're going to be dropped off on whatever land. As land becomes plentiful, all the people who own land, if they dump it, land becomes plentiful. You can build more houses. It just changes everything. I think that
Mhm.
I actually think that owning real estate over the next 10 to 15 years, if you understand how Bitcoin works, owning real estate is going to be extremely painful. It's like I said, Dave Ramsey lost 1,000 Bitcoin worth of wealth
Yep.
in 7 months. So the people who have $10 million worth of real estate, I think that's a good portfolio size. If you have $10 million worth of real estate, you're doing very, very well for yourself. That $10 million will eventually go to 20 million. It'll go to 30 million. But in terms of Bitcoin, it'll keep falling and falling because Bitcoin is going to massively outperform everything else. So what you're going to see is people are no longer going to want to own houses as an investment, as a savings vehicle. People are actually going to own houses to live in. So those are two of the big things. Like the gold will finally be back in circulation, so we'll be able to have better technology, innovation, and then the second thing would be the houses. When we no longer need houses as a store of value, that completely changes everything. It changes everything about how we see investing, how we see saving. Instead of people having housing as their base layer, their foundation, housing will just be an expense. It'll be a lifestyle choice.
It's so incredible because there's already this slow leak. I'm trying to think of what it's, iceberg hitting a ship, the Titanic, or it's again, I always come back to that example, I guess, but it's just a slow leak that Bitcoin is sucking up that liquidity of the system or monetary premium across the system, which I think it's one of the most under talked about things and under most misunderstood things across society. And that's where, like you said, that $2 trillion in Bitcoin, that could be spread across these other assets. And normally if Bitcoin didn't exist, it would, that other 2 trillion would be spread across all these other assets, increasing the price of these things even more, putting them out of the reach of the average person. So now you have this process that's so hard. It's a slow leak. Water's just slowly coming in. The average person, again, it's like the Titanic. Like they're reading the newspaper clippings. Like, this thing can't sink. Like, what are you talking about? The ship looks fine still. And then by the time it's too late and the ship's 45-degree angle, then everyone's trying to jump off the side and get into lifeboats and they're freezing in the water. That's the thing. And I think that's what, again, people that are in Bitcoin or a Bitcoiner, you're trying to educate them. It's why we spend so much time doing the things. And there's so many people out there trying to spend so much time to educate the average person to get them off the ship now, instead of when the thing is listing or when it's 45-degree angle and it's snapping in half. I think that's the thing that scares me the most, because that shows up in civil unrest, right? Like, those instances are when civil unrest really starts happening. And we're not close to that point, but in a year, in 5 years, in 10 years, like, yeah, we could really have some massive issues, and probably will, if we don't start jumping off the ship now. And so I think that, I mean, that those I could speak, we could talk for hours just about that alone, and just going into that, the civil unrest, like the ramifications of what could happen. Um, so it's just, yeah, it's just absolutely fascinating. Why are people so adverse to, and we mentioned this earlier about people being so averse to almost seeing it or talking about it, and the debasement, and just seeing that there is an 8 to 12%, like you said, the Fed printing all this currency just in the last few years. I feel like people are more waking up more now than they ever have been, but it's still such a fight and bite, scratch, and claw to get people to awaken to the game that's being played on everyone. Why do you think that is?
I think most people haven't put in the time to understand what it is. I think they um, keep in mind that when you go on YouTube, let's say you search for Bitcoin, what are the first results going to be? It's going to be like extravagant news, big news,
Yeah,
breaking news, right? It's just like
huge crypto
people,
channel or something. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, right. Like, and it doesn't, or Bitcoin about to crash, Bitcoin about to skyrocket, Bitcoin going to 100x, Bitcoin down 99%. It's just gonna be all
yeah.
that kind of stuff. So if you just search for Bitcoin and you look at what Bitcoin is on YouTube, it'll give you a different perspective. And I think that's what most people do now. YouTube is a massive search engine. A lot of people go on YouTube and they learn. But if you, like, let's say if you read a book like the Bitcoin Standard, or the one that's behind you, The Price of Tomorrow.
Hmm.
the bullish case for Bitcoin. If you read those books, it gives you a completely different perspective because the YouTube guys. I try to avoid that. I don't talk about, oh, Bitcoin's going to $1 billion. I know you avoid that as well, but we're
Hmm.
not going to be coming up on the first page, because
Right.
the ones that come up on the first page are the ones who get the most clicks, the ones who spread fear, uncertainty, and doubt, the ones who make people think that Bitcoin is going, they're making weird faces on their thumbnails, and thankfully we don't do that. But of course, our results are proportionate to it, right? Because
Hmm.
if we don't make those faces, people aren't going to click as much. But I think the substance there is that um, most people don't. Most people just think of Bitcoin as a gamble. They think of it as a short term asset. They don't think of it as something that they can hold for 50 years. I After it took me a long time to figure it out. Most people won't have 4 years to spend studying Bitcoin. Most people won't have even an hour to spend studying Bitcoin. Actually, they have it. They just don't want to use it to study Bitcoin. They want to watch a show on TV. They want to listen to music. They want to go to a bar, right? Those are the things that people want. They don't want to spend their time reading books, right? I think that's part of the reason why a lot of people don't get it. If you just think of Bitcoin as a short term gamble, of course you're not going to buy it. You're going to think that's going to go down. A lot of people are so worried about the volatility. And then one crazy thing here is that I've noticed every time I buy Bitcoin, it finds a way to come down. I've come to terms with it. I don't really care anymore. It doesn't matter what Bitcoin's price is when I buy it. If I have extra cash, I'm going to buy Bitcoin, right? If but to me, I've understood that if I buy Bitcoin, I expect to feel stupid for 4 years, and the
Hmm.
reason for that is that I know it's going to be volatile. I know that the price is going to fluctuate, and there's this really. I think more recently I started talking about this chart, and I found this through. I actually searched for this after seeing some content from. Do you know who Oliver Velez is?
Yes.
Yes. So
Yep.
he talks about the 4 year moving average price of Bitcoin. And this is something that I've been talking about a lot in my videos, where if you just look at at the price at the end of the day of Bitcoin, it's going to seem
Hmm.
scary. Like you're going to feel like, oh, I need to time it. I need to buy the lows, sell the highs, buy the lows, sell the high, buy the low, sell the high, buy the low, sell the high. But
Yep.
when you look at the 4 year moving average, the way that I see it, this is a distraction. The price of Bitcoin is a distraction. The way that I see it, get rid of the price at the end of the day and look at the 4 year moving average. This is why I say this is where I came to that conclusion that if I buy Bitcoin, I'm going to feel stupid for 4 years, but after that 4 year period, I'll be fine. This is the
Hmm.
4 year moving average price of Bitcoin. And for the people who don't know what this is, a lot of people don't. I've spoken to people, I've asked them, do you understand what this is? They don't. So let me just explain that quickly. Basically, the 4 year moving average is the average price for the last 1,458 days. So it averages 1,458 days. So the last 1,458 days will be averaged and you'll get one price. And that's what you get with this line here. So what happens is the oldest price, day number 1,459, is removed, and then you replace it with, let's say, today's price.
Hmm.
So over time, what you see here is that Bitcoin's price is just going up. It just keeps going up. Why would you want to why would you want to trade in and out? Why would you want to gamble on this thing? Just like I said, all you have to do is buy it and hold it for 4 years and you're good. That's it. Put in money that you need for 4 years, avoid the leak from the legacy financial system, avoid the inflation leak, and avoid the fees. Like if you have your money in a 401k, a lot of people, they fall for the 401k scam because they see that they get 100% upfront reward from their employer. Like their employer will match it. But the thing is that over the next 30, 40, 50 years, you're paying massive fees to Wall Street. Instead of paying, let's say, a 0.1% with VOO, you're paying 2%. And that adds up very, very quickly. But they don't quite understand that. Most people don't quite understand that because they don't see how 2% a year can add up to 50, 60% of your portfolio over a few years. And basically, what they're doing is they're giving up these kinds of returns, this kind of return. They're locking their money up in a 401k. and they're losing out on Bitcoin's growth. They're losing out on the growth of the S&P 500, and they're just putting money, or actually I don't even think the S&P 500 is worth buying anymore. They're missing out on Bitcoin's returns, and they're paying massive fees because their employer has convinced them that, or the not even their employer, but the finance community, the finance industry has convinced them that the 401k is the best way to go. So don't zoom in. Don't look at the day-to-day price. Stop looking at this. This is a distraction. Once you get rid of the distraction, so this is the colorful stuff is a distraction. Once you get rid of that distraction, this is what you get. This is what you should be focusing on. Focus on the long term, focus on 4 years. If you can't, you probably shouldn't be buying Bitcoin.
It's funny you say that, because that was one of the big things that orange pilled me was, the network effect in essence. So kind of what you're, the log chart, and also, like you said, the moving averages, and seeing these really zoomed out views of things. And the old investing adage, as you well know, is the trend is your friend. And it's opposite. I mean, you look at you invert that or flip it upside down, and it's the currency printing, right? We go back to this debasement thing of, for whatever reason, the average person cannot wrap their heads around the fact that the currency is being debased. 1 Bitcoin equals 1 Bitcoin. The same 3-bedroom 2-bath ranch is the same one from 40, 50 years ago, but now it's worth 10x the dollars. You have to find 10 times more dollars so yeah, there you go. Exactly. It's like that's what's fascinating to me, is that you're fighting this trend. And so I try to ask people as well, like, do you think we're 37 trillion in debt? Do you think that that's going to speed up or slow down? Like, do you think this trend, all of a sudden we've lost 99% of the purchasing power since 1913? Do you think that's going to go the other way all of a sudden? And that's where it's like, so I'd love for you to touch on all this, but also like it's like this weird paradox where it's hard for the average person, again, to see that the more that the government prints, like, because that's the thing, like, everyone pretty much to a T, you could get 100 people and 99 would be like, yeah, the government's got to print. We're going to get more debt. It's just like, it is what it is. We're America,
I
blah,
think
blah,
it's
blah.
good.
Yeah, they think it's good almost. It's like, well, we're the dominant, blah, 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 whatever. But it's like, why? How do you not then make that logical assumption that, like, wait, this thing's finite. It's going to keep sucking up all of this liquidity. You keep spewing more liquidity into the air. What do you think is going to happen to Bitcoin, this asset here that's just sitting here? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to suck all that up, and it's going to take more of these dollars now to find the same Bitcoin. I don't get it. I don't understand it.
Yeah. So I think one thing that the one thing that I like to think of is the U.S. government's debt. Again, like you said, $37 trillion. Is it going to speed up? Of course, because if our expenses are going up, like so I was looking at a hotel in Montreal
Mm-hmm.
a couple weeks from now, and it's like $400 a night.
Jeez, yeah.
Everything is getting more expensive, like literally everything. So if things are getting expensive for us, they're getting more expensive for the US government as well. As the value of that US dollar decreases, they need to print more of it to buy the same things. So you're going to see that it's like I said, the US dollar can lose 99%, then it can lose another 99%. It can keep going, right? It can keep going. The US government's debt. Okay, so Bitcoin's price is eventually going to be a rounding error. Let's add on to that. The US government's debt is eventually going to be a rounding error. It took the US government like 180 years to get to their first what is it, $1 trillion worth of debt. And they did this, they got into another $1 trillion worth of debt in the last month and a half. So 180 years versus a month and a half. Like
Insane.
that time horizon is going to keep getting shorter and shorter and shorter. Right?
Rajat. So that, yeah. So thank you. This is the inverse. I think that people, and I want you to keep going on this and pull this thread, because we're at the exponential debt part. So like we keep saying like, oh, Bitcoin is going to go up to 1 million in a year or 4 years, whatever. People are like, oh, like, what do you mean? It's like, but then in the same sentence, they will say, well, the debt's, yeah, it's going to keep growing. Well, yeah, it's kind of speeding up. Like, look, here's the math, but they can't make that logical, cross that bridge somehow.
Yeah.
It's they're the same.
Yeah, so let me actually show you another graph. This is another graphic that's really great. A lot of people have already seen this, but right now the U.S. government debt is $37.16 trillion dollars. You can see the number here, U.S. national debt. You can see the interest on the debt is $1 trillion a year. $1 trillion a year. So let's say, for example, in the short term, the Federal Reserve decreases the interest rate. That's what Trump really wants. He wants Jerome Powell to lower rates, or he wants him to leave so he can lower interest rates. So what's going to happen here is, if Powell lowers rates, this number is going to start skyrocketing. So if rates are zero, do you think the US government is going to borrow more money or less money? Of course, more. Of course they're going to borrow more. There's no cost. What's the cost to borrowing 0% interest loans? Nothing. There's no cost. Maybe an origination cost, but the US government can pay, they can print money and pay for that too. Right? So they don't care.
Yep.
Even at higher interest rates, they don't care. They'll keep spending money. So what's going to happen here is, this number is eventually going to be 40, then 50, then 60, and the interest rates are going to have to be forced to go back up again. And you're going to see that this number is going to be 2 trillion. Then it's going to be 3 trillion. Then it's going to be 4 trillion. And this number is going to squeeze every single penny out of US citizens. It's going to require every single penny from the US citizens to pay just the interest on the debt. And if they don't pay this off, they're paying this off with borrowed money. Again, so they're paying this off with even more borrowed money. So it's compounding against them. It's not like this number is just gone. It's going to keep adding on, and it's going to keep adding on. This number is contributing. So the interest on the debt is contributing to the US national debt. It's adding more debt on top of what's already there. And it's going to keep happening. It's going to keep adding more and more debt on top of what's already there. You're going to see that keep growing. And at the end of the day, what you're going to see is more money is printed. But now let's flip that. So you're going to see the debt go up, but you're also going to see more money go into Bitcoin. Out of the money that is printed, you're going to see more of it going into Bitcoin. And what that means is that Bitcoin's price is going to go up, because the price is determined by buyers and sellers. And actually, we go back to that first point. Bitcoin runs out at every price. Eventually, all the sellers at every single Bitcoin price will run out. The people who are willing to give away their Bitcoin for dollars are going to run out. As the US government keeps adding more and more debt, you're going to see that the floor for Bitcoin's price keeps going up, and it keeps going up, and it keeps going up. And then on top of that, actually, let's look at how Bitcoiners will contribute to this. And the US government is allowing it. They want it to happen. They want the dollar to get weaker, right? So the Bitcoiners are going to contribute to this by having these most powerful asset in the world that's growing extremely fast compared to everything else, and they can start taking on loans. So JP Morgan, for example, I think it was JP Morgan, they said that they're going to do crypto-backed loans. So the only crypto that I find relevant is Bitcoin. So the people who own Bitcoin, they can give them their Bitcoin as collateral, and JP Morgan is going to print more money and give it to them. They're going to hand it over to them. They're going to print more money. Like, how, I don't know how people aren't seeing this. I don't get it. Yeah. As more money is printed, the savings that you have are going to be devalued. Your savings can buy fewer things because everybody else on earth needs to be paid more for the value that they create. And you're going to see that, like I said, houses or a hotel costs you $400 a night now. Eventually it costs $500 a night. Then it'll cost $600, then $700, then $800. It'll keep going up because more and more dollars are going to be added to the system. The people who are working are going to want to be paid for the work that they do. So they're going to charge more and more because they know that the things that they buy are going to cost more. Because again, the US government is going to keep adding more and more dollars to the system. They're going to compete. They're going to compete with everybody else to buy the things that everybody else wants, and they're going to hoard them for themselves, right? And that's what they're doing, right? The cost of war will keep going up. The cost of food will keep going up. The cost of shelter will keep going up. The cost of transportation will keep going up. And the only thing that you can do to not be affected by that cost, well, you're going to be affected, but your asset's going to grow more. The only thing you can do to not be affected by that is own Bitcoin. Your Bitcoin is going to appreciate at, let's say, 50% a year. The value of things is going to go up at, let's say, 10% a year. So you have a net positive of 40%.
Everything you are learning in this episode is completely moot and does not matter if you hold Bitcoin and are still leaving it on an exchange or sharing keys and your KYC information with a third party. This is your wake-up call now. You are only self-sovereign if you alone hold the keys to your wealth. 100% self-custody sounds daunting at first. Believe me, I lost 2 years of massive gains over a decade ago because I was worried about taking the few minutes it took to understand self-custody. And that's exactly why you need to talk to my friends, Tony Yazbek and his team at the Bitcoin Way. We just interviewed Tony recently, has over 80,000 views, an overwhelming response. People love his story and the simplicity he shares of how easy it is to custody and take ownership of the greatest money we've ever seen. They'll train you to do it right the first time. Head on over to thebitcoinway.com/Brandon to schedule a free 30-minute consultation today. Their 5-star rated service is exactly what you need. Quit sitting on your hands like I did and get started today. Again, that's thebitcoinway.com/BRANDON. Now that you have the team in place, you need the professional tools. My partners at Stampseed have them for you. Do not save your generational wealth on paper. Save it in titanium. It's estimated that 30% of all Bitcoin is lost forever, and that's only going to increase. Do not be a statistic. Go to Stampseed, check out with code Brandon, BRANDON, for 15% off store-wide. Save your generational wealth in titanium for generation after generation and sleep well at night. What do you think that people should do in terms of, because there's, a lot of people that I'm sure, watch your channel, they watch this channel, and they're in their 35 to 65 years old, they're male, they generally, they probably have a 401k or an RSP or superannuation, or, they have some type of retirement. You touched on this earlier, so it made me think of it. Like, how would you talk to your financial advisor? I mean, you come from this world, the more the traditional world, being a CFA, being in real estate, but people having talked to their financial advisor, people that have 401k, like you said, like, oh, they're matching this. And you're like, what should the average person do? Is it because you get a lot of like like, what should I do? I just save in Bitcoin and do nothing. Like, how does the average person, you're hearing this talk and they're like, yeah, like I've been hearing this and like, you're making a lot of sense, Rajat, but like, I'm stuck in this, or like, it's this or that, or there's something, impeding someone. Like, how do you approach that? Or what's your advice to someone?
I mean, that's literally what you do, right? You buy Bitcoin and you live your life. You work your job instead of having to. Seyfedin Ammous says this really well in his book. So you work your job and uh, you live your life. That's it. You don't have to be a financial advisor, a portfolio manager at the same time as being a nurse or being a doctor, right? So you don't have to. You not everybody doesn't have to learn how to invest and take risks and gamble just to keep their money. Today you have to work for your money twice. On a Bitcoin standard, you won't have to. You just buy your Bitcoin and you're good. You work your job. Let's say you work a 9 to 5. You get a let's say you get $4,000 after taxes every month. That's $48,000 a year, $1,000 a week or so. Um, let's say you spend $2,500 on that of that on your life, or 3,500, whatever you can, and then you put the rest of it towards Bitcoin. At some point, your Bitcoin is going to cover your expenses. At some point, you'll be able to have at some point you'll have so much Bitcoin, and Bitcoin's return will be so great that you won't have to worry about working at some point anymore. You'll be able to work because you want to. And I think what we're going to see because of this is we're going to see a lot more people following creative professions. We're going to see a lot more people actually being able to be like having the time to be creative, to create the things that they think other people will enjoy. Um, and I don't know, the financial advisors, part of the reason why they don't want to switch over to Bitcoin, I don't even think it's a negative intention, like they don't want to screw their clients over. I think it's because they're just used to being very, very skeptical of anything that sounds too good to be true. Like Bitcoin, to the average person, sounds too good to be true. The average person thinks, oh, there's no way
Yep.
that the US government didn't create this. That's the first thing.
Yes,
Or the
NSA or
CIA didn't create it.
CIA. Yeah.
Right. Like
Yep.
they'll start with that, and because of that they'll just be held back first of all, right?
Yep.
And then the next thing that you have people saying is that, oh, it's a Ponzi scheme. So because of that, and if you don't dig deeper into what a Ponzi scheme is, you're not going to figure out what Bitcoin is. People have said that Bitcoin is a decentralized Ponzi scheme. How does that even make any sense? Like these are people, like Peter Schiff has said that it's a decentralized Ponzi scheme. How is he
Oxymoron. Yeah.
right? How is he like a great economist and he doesn't understand what a Ponzi scheme is? How can you explain to me how a Ponzi scheme can be decentralized?
No, yeah, yeah. I mean, the power has to accrue and upwards up to someone at the top in essence. But if there's no one at the
S-
top, then I don't, I don't
So
know.
what they think, I think what they think is that the people who own a lot of Bitcoin, they're
Conflate,
the
yeah,
ones
who
who are
owns a lot
benefiting.
versus, yeah, yeah.
But then the thing is that they can sell it, and they can sell it to somebody else, and then that person can now accrue power as well. So anybody
Hmm.
can have power on a Bitcoin. The Bitcoin price
Ownership of the
is
network versus who owns a lot of Bitcoin. That's what, yeah, that's
yes,
what people conflate. Yes.
right. So they think that people who own Bitcoin control the network. No, they don't. It doesn't.
Yep.
They control the price. They can easily drop. Let's say somebody has 1 million Bitcoin. They can easily sell all of their Bitcoin. They can wipe out a bunch of miners,
Hmm.
and now, and their Bitcoin gets bought up. But at some point, Bitcoin's going to recover.
Yep.
Right? The difficulty will adjust to make it so that
Yep.
miners can come back on the market. They can come back to mining again. So they may attack those miners temporarily. Let's say, for example, Marathon. If Bitcoin's price drops to $5,000, Marathon will probably no longer be profitable, and they'll probably go bankrupt.
Hmm.
Right? Um, let's
A
say
lot of
other
miners. Yeah.
other.
Yeah.
But what
Right.
that'll do is it'll lead to. It's actually a good thing. I mean,
It
I don't know
adjusts.
if
Yeah.
it's necessarily a. I don't even know if that's a bad thing for Bitcoin, because
Hmm.
at that point you'll probably see more people mining from home.
Hmm.
People who have cheaper miners, people who have bit axes, they'll be contributing a massive amount of wealth or a massive amount of hash power to the network. And what you'll see is more people mining from home are now winning blocks, and they're
Hmm.
getting rewards. And now you have more people who are incentivized to get a miner because they think, oh, this is a lottery ticket, and I can mine from home, and I can potentially win I can win a certain amount of Bitcoin. Now you have more miners coming to the network, and I don't know if it even if the people who own a bunch of Bitcoin, I don't even think they can control the network at this point, because we saw a few days ago 80,000 Bitcoin were sold into the market, and the market absorbed it. Right, it
Yeah.
dropped, like the price dropped like
Couple.
$7,000.
Yeah.
Right, and
Yep.
and that's 80,000 Bitcoin.
It's
80,000.
insane.
What's 80,000 Bitcoin? 80,000 Bitcoin is like
Yeah. I gotta do the
0.3%
math.
of the
Yeah.
total, 0.4% or
Yep.
so. So they dropped
Times three.
4.4% of the supply, and the market barely moved.
That's
If
like half a year supply.
0.4%,
Yeah. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
if
That's insane.
0.4% of the housing market went on the market and people just started
Yeah.
competing to sell, you know how low the price would go?
Jeez.
It would go way lower.
That would. Yeah.
That would destroy the market, right? If
Wow.
0.4% of all stocks were just dumped on the market, what would happen?
Yep.
Right?
There'd be civil unrest.
People,
Yeah.
I think that's what people don't quite understand. They don't quite see that's valuable. That liquidity is very valuable, and Bitcoin is a global asset, right? So a
Hmm.
lot of, back to the question, financial advisors, I think they need to get over that hump, right? They need to understand that um all those, I guess, misconceptions, they have to understand them. You have to put in time to understand Bitcoin, to actually understand where the misconceptions come from. If you don't put any time into understanding Bitcoin, you're not going to get past the misconceptions.
I want to go back to something we said earlier, just really quick. The Walmart, we were talking about Walmart accepting, and I was just thinking of money converging to one. Do you think there would still be a Gresham's law thing at play for a while, where, like, even my thought with it is that even if like Apple, or you have some of these big companies, which seemingly is like you can kind of feel it underneath the surface, right? Like you can feel like there's going to be some big things happening over the next year or two where people are like, yeah, Walmart, whoever accepting. But is it just like the whole, like, well, the Roman emperor is debasing the gold, so the good gold goes into hiding, and then the fake brass, whatever, copper is the one that's being used, where people will still a lot of times use the fiat just day to day. Like, I've tried to work through that numerous times, where I think it'll be huge confidence signals, but how much actually happens, like, that's the adoption question, where it's like it feels like that has to be a big segment, or like a barrier that's taken out. But will people use it? Like, will people be using, and more people will for sure, but will you still have that Gresham's law thing at play for a while?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, every time somebody buys Bitcoin, like, think about it. Every time Michael Saylor buys Bitcoin, he eliminates thousands
Mm-hmm.
of
Yeah.
whole coiners, right? He
Yeah.
eliminates tens of thousands of people who can buy zero point 0.1 Bitcoin. He eliminates millions of people who can buy 0.01 Bitcoin. So of course that's going to keep going. I think that he's making it play out himself. He's
Mm-hmm.
giving
Yeah.
away the crappy money, and he's taking back the good money, and we're going to keep seeing that. And I think that feeds into the principle that we started this with. Bitcoin's prices will eventually be, every price will be eventually be a rounding error. Bitcoin will run out at every price. it plays into that. You're not. I mean, the supply will still be there. People will still be willing to sell you some Bitcoin for dollars, but eventually the amount of Bitcoin that's being sold is going to decrease and decrease until people are only willing to give away their Bitcoin for goods and services. The merchants are the ones who are going to have to step into this, right? At some point, you won't be able to buy Bitcoin. People won't be willing to sell you their Bitcoin. So the merchants, I think this is where we have the merchants step in. So if merchants want
Mm.
Bitcoin, at some point they're not going to be able to just borrow money to buy it. They're going to have to charge it to their customers. Because at some point, you're not going to be able to buy thousands of Bitcoin, borrow money and buy thousands of Bitcoin, borrow money and buy 10,000 Bitcoin, 100,000 Bitcoin. At some point, you're going to have to sell your goods and services for that Bitcoin. And I think that's one thing that Microsoft investors are going to see. So Microsoft rejected Bitcoin, McDonald's rejected Bitcoin. I think Dell rejected Bitcoin too. So at some point, the amount of Bitcoin, so let's say they each could have gotten 100,000 Bitcoin. At some point, the entire company's not going to be worth 100,000 Bitcoin,
Mm-hmm.
right? At some point, the entire company's not even going to be worth 50,000 Bitcoin. And then we have a company like MicroStrategy that's accumulating as much Bitcoin as it can. It's creating new financial products to buy Bitcoin. It's basically converting the bond market into Bitcoin, right? He's basically issuing new securities that can be used to the proceeds of those are being used to buy Bitcoin and to convert that fiat into Bitcoin. So at some point, we're going to see that the only way to get Bitcoin is to charge it for your goods and services, to charge it for your physical. Let's say you sell tables. You have to sell your tables for Bitcoin if you want Bitcoin. There was a video from this guy on YouTube. He sold a $50,000 watch for Bitcoin. He was talking to the.
I was just
Uh,
going to bring that
did you
up. Yeah,
did you
yeah,
watch it?
yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I
So
did.
he
It's
sold
great.
a watch. Yeah, he sold a watch for Bitcoin, and I watched the video all the way through. And at one point, the watch salesman, the person working there, the guy who owns the shop, the guy asked him, "Do you pay Bitcoin for these?" The guy who was selling the watch, he said, "No, I hold on to my Bitcoin. I stash my Bitcoin. I'm not going to give you my Bitcoin for your watch. Your watch is a business to me. The Bitcoin is my life." Right? Like he didn't actually say that, but that's how I saw
Yeah.
it. Right?
Yep.
He sees the watch as a business. He sees selling the watch as a way to make a profit. Perfectly fine. He's not going to give his Bitcoin away for it though. He's going to trade everything else to get more Bitcoin. And for all we know, maybe he sells that watch. So he buys the watch. He bought the watch for like 35K or something. Yeah, 35K.
Mm-hmm.
So he bought the watch for
Yep.
35K. Let's say he sells it for 40K. He's going to take let's say he takes $2,000 worth of that profit. He puts it into Bitcoin, right? And you have that person who keeps doing that and keeps doing that. But eventually, you're not going to have. Eventually, he's not going to be able to buy that Bitcoin because that Bitcoin won't be available for dollars. So
Yeah.
he's going to have to sell. He's going to have to buy, or sorry, he's going to have sell. He's going to have to sell watches, and he's going to directly have to only accept Bitcoin. That shop accepts Bitcoin, but at some point they're not going to be able to accept anything else. And what we're going to see is that these companies that actually accumulate Bitcoin, they're the most powerful companies in the world. Like MicroStrategy,
Yep.
for example, they have over 3% of the supply now. I think maybe just under 3%, but at some point they're going to be the most powerful company in the world. They're going to be worth more than every other company in the world because Bitcoin is, as an asset, going to be worth more than everything else in the world. If the company that has the most Bitcoin isn't worth the most in the world, then what is? What's going to be worth more than that company when Bitcoin is the most powerful asset that ever existed? So what we're going to see is more and more merchants are going to want Bitcoin, and the only way for them to get it, or more and more entrepreneurs, just people, will want Bitcoin, and the only way for them to get it is to sell their goods and services for Bitcoin. And we're going to see more competition in everything. We're going to see more competition in technology, in let's say cell phones, app producers. We're going to see like even this mic, for example. Like I have this mic here. The people who produce these mics, we're going to see better and better companies come out because they're able to save in Bitcoin and they can put more money towards research and development. And
Yep.
I read this really great quote. Um, capitalism is creative destruction. Have you heard that
Yeah.
before?
Yes.
It's
Yep.
basically like you have multiple people competing for the same thing. They compete to create the same thing, and each one tries their own way of doing things, right? And the one that succeeds is the one that moves forward, right? It's like natural selection, basically,
Yeah. Yep.
right? So
Yep.
the market selects which one is the best product, the company that can make the most profits. If somebody tries to, let's say for example, some people try to compete on price. You can't really
Mm-hmm.
do that on a Bitcoin standard, because if you compete on price, the price will keep trending to zero. There will be other entrepreneurs who are willing to take your profit and they're willing to sell for even cheaper. So you have to compete on the product, you have to compete on the service, you have to compete on giving a better experience.
Yep.
Meaning that we're going to have better companies, we're going to have more research and development going into creating better products, and everything improves, right? Even the companies.
Yep.
Let's say, for example, Steak and Shake. I went to Steak and Shake when we went to Vegas
Mm-hmm.
at the conference. I went to Steak and Shake and I got a burger. I know that's going to be an extremely expensive meal in 20, 30, 40 years. People are going to be thinking, "Oh, this guy's stupid. Why did he sell his great grandchildren's annual salary for a burger?" Right? But to me, the way that I see it, um, next time I go, it's very likely that that same meal is going to cost me a lot less. So I actually remember the exact price of that meal. It was like not the exact price, but it was about 16,400 satoshis or so.
Mm-hmm.
So 16,400 satoshis this year. Next year, maybe it'll cost me 12,000 satoshis. Then the following year, maybe it'll cost me 8,000 satoshis. Then the following year, maybe it'll cost me 6,000. Right? It'll keep going down, but the way that I see it, I could easily spend and replace at this point, right? I buy the burger, replace that Bitcoin, right? But I like seeing the progress. Just having the timestamp. I spent this much on this
Yes.
burger, and today the same burger is going to cost me way less. So I bought Saifedean's books. You know, Saifedean was the
Mm-hmm.
he has like this bundle of books.
The
It
bun.
cost
Yeah.
me something like in total, it cost me something like 174,000 satoshis at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy that I spent it, right? It cost me a lot. Like I paid him with Bitcoin. I did replace it right away. He gave me a discount for buying the books with Bitcoin. So the way that I saw it was an arbitrage opportunity. I buy the
Mm-hmm.
books, pay with Bitcoin, and buy more Bitcoin, right? Um, but the way that I see it, over time, the cost of those books is going to go up. The value that he created is always going to be there, and I'm going to be able to extract way more value from the books
Right. The
than I
skills
paid
are
for
with you
them.
forever. Yeah.
So
Yep.
it's worth it to me, right? So right now, the 174,000 satoshis at the time, the books, I think Bitcoin was like 60K at that time, 50K or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But now the price has tripled.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm okay with it. I don't care. The way that I see it, I already replaced the Bitcoin. So what we're going to see is people are going to notice these things. That's what I mean. People are going to notice that one day they spent 16,000 satoshis, then they spent 14,000, then 12, then 10, then 8, then 6, then 4. And how many people do you think were incentivized to start accumulating Bitcoin or to look into Bitcoin because of Stake and Shake? And how many people do you think bought Bitcoin because of Stake and Shake? Probably a lot. I would say at least a significant number, right? And those people are going to notice if they paid for their burger with Bitcoin, they're going to notice they're spending less and less Bitcoin over time, but the burger is getting better.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're getting more food for the same amount of Bitcoin.
Better
This time
ingredients. Yeah.
it cost me 16,000 satoshis to get a large fries. I think it was a large fries, a burger, a double patty burger, and a milkshake. Maybe next time I'll be able to buy 2 meals for the same amount of
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin. Then the next time I'll be able to buy 3 meals and 4 meals. And at some point I'll be able to buy a week's worth of meals for the same amount of Bitcoin. Then at some point I'll be able to buy a month's worth of burgers for the same amount of Bitcoin. And that's what really makes things that's what made things really click for me. That's what made me start thinking of it from a different perspective. And I think that'll help a lot of people as well. A lot of people will see that their cost of living is going down in terms of Bitcoin, and they should accumulate as much as possible because they'll be able to spend that Bitcoin on more things later on. That's the best part of this, right? And again, for merchants, it works out really well because they don't have to pay the fees on the transaction. The only fees that they have to pay for is maybe managing their UTXOs. That's perfectly fine. If they use Lightning, way easier for them to um, to deal with the fees. They don't have to pay any fees basically. Um, yeah, more Bitcoin locked up on Lightning, more Bitcoin locked up on Liquid. It'll just make things more. It'll make things more and more liquid over time, right? It'll make things even better. And think about it: 15 years from now, how much better are things going to get? Way better, right? Like this is. I heard this quote from someone. AI is at its worst that it'll ever be right now.
So
And
true.
think about how much better we are compared to like 10 years ago. AI didn't even exist for the mass
Yeah.
public,
Yep.
right? And AI is AI is going to make things deflationary. And if you're saving in Bitcoin, your purchasing power is going to increase. So your cost of living is going to decrease at the same time your purchasing power is going to increase. So like these people who own, let's say, 0.01 Bitcoin, zero point 0.1 Bitcoin, you feel like it's not that much, but at some point you're going to notice that it's way more than you think.
You mentioned creative destruction too with capitalism too, and so there's a couple of things I want to touch on here is in a minute. But Knut Svanholm has, I've got one of his books back
Oh,
here.
the everything divided. Yeah.
Yeah, everything divided by 21 million. But he has a book about praxeology, and it's like 150 to 200 pages, and it's just critical thinking, how to think, basically, but thinking from first principles, and it's an incredible book. And he talks about utility in there, and the way, like, the modern economists of today look at everything backwards, in essence, right? Like this Sailors talked about the pseudoscience, and like we've kind of learned everything from like the wrong, like looking through a prism from like the wrong angle, or like a telescope from the other direction. You're like, I don't see it. It's like, yeah, you've got it flipped around. And so like the creative destruction part is the capitalism. Like people always get this confused where, like, I feel like it's a lack of faith in humanity. Like people always are like so concerned about like the marginal person, which is part of humans being good by nature, and being created in God's image. Of like, humans are all inherently good. We're all created good. And do people go off the rails? Yeah, we all do, to different varying degrees, right? So that's where we're always trying to come back to truth, back to truth, back to truth. And in some people it takes longer and it's harder and the road's hard, right? So that's what makes life. But like this creative destruction, like people get it twisted, in the sense of we're always trying to like insert things into society to like stop that creative destruction, whether it's like the we're giving people oh my gosh, not a stipend, I want to say
Oh, like subsidies.
yeah, subsidies. Thank you. I don't know why I couldn't
Yeah.
think of. So subsidies, or giving people, these different entitlements, all these different things. When instead of just having faith and saying, "Hey, like humans, I believe in you. Like we can. If you failed in this business here, then that means you have an opportunity now to go create a better product or service and compete because you failed here. Or maybe that's not your calling. Maybe you need to go somewhere else and create a new business, or maybe you need to go work for another company. Or
Yeah.
and we just don't let that happen. And so, like you said, like
Yes.
people, and because of this, we have prices should continually be falling, which they are in Bitcoin terms. Bitcoin's the first thing that really shows the average human, like, oh, they are falling. And so capitalism works, but we've built it on this faulty monetary standard for the last 112 years, at least since 1913, where we have it built on sand and not rock. And
Yeah.
that's where Bitcoin becomes that bedrock that you can actually build it on. You can see, and the average person, because prices are coming down, like, yeah, you might be out of a job for a month or a business and you're trying to find something new. But guess what? If prices have come down by half or whatever, now you still benefit. Like you benefit even if you're out of work for 6 months or
Yeah.
a month or a week. Like, but people just have such a hard time seeing that. So anyway, it's, you talked about the research and development with, I always use the iPhone example too, of like, think of Apple if they were selling iPhones for 1,000 Bitcoin per iPhone 10 years ago, and whatever the cost calculation is, just for easy math. It's like, do you think they'd be putting crappy batteries in their phone 5 years later or 8 years later? Like, no, they wouldn't need to. They'd be spending all their time on R&D because they're so incredibly wealthy at this point that they're like, wow, this is amazing. Like I can just like provide a better product and service. And it's like just flipping everything on its head. And it goes back to, how does Bitcoin fix it? So my kind of question with all this, and I'd love for you to touch on any of this, but we always get this as Bitcoiners. You feel frustrated because everyone yells and moans and complains about all these different ills of society, and you're always coming back to like, well, Bitcoin fixes that, and then like you become that guy. Everyone's like, well, I know, Brandon, I know, Rajat, Bitcoin fixes this, and you're like, no, it literally does. Like it's like it does. Like we got to talk about this, and it's like where is this missing link that it shapes the incentives of society and everything we are doing, and Bitcoin flips that on its head. So I'd love for you to get your thoughts on some of this, because this is such like a monumental undertaking, but really the most important, I think, argument of our time, in essence.
I think one of the actually what you were talking about there with planned obsolescence, basically, one of the
Mm,
reasons why even planned obsolescence exists, where we have companies is creating products that are designed to break. The reason that
yeah.
that exists is because they need cash flow, right?
Yes.
Let's say you have there's this really great furniture shop near my house. They make really good products. They make high quality products, and they went bankrupt because people can't afford the things that they create, right? While on the other hand, a company like IKEA, they're getting bigger and bigger because
Yeah.
they
Great point.
create low quality products that everybody can afford, right? So in this economy, because this way of living that we have, this society, creating low quality products is actually going to get you further ahead
Yeah.
because it's just
And then
about
people to buy
volume.
more right, as
Right,
well.
it's about volume. Like
Yeah.
the people who buy a table from there, the table is made of cardboard, whatever the filler is, MDF. It breaks, and they don't blame the they
They don't
don't
blame the
blame the
system. They blame the
yes,
company.
they
Yeah.
blame the company, exactly.
Yes.
That's what I meant to say. Yes, they don't
Yep.
blame the system. They blame the company. They don't blame the fact that the company would actually go bankrupt if they didn't if they didn't create low quality
Monetary
product.
system. Sorry, Rajat.
Yes,
They don't blame the
go ahead.
monetary
Go ahead.
system. They blame capitalism or the economic
Yes,
system we're using, but they don't blame the monetary layer underneath. That's the part that's
yes.
buried that people can't see. So yes, I wanted to
Right. They
clarify.
don't blame the foundation like that. Like you said, it's made of sand, right? It's made
Yes,
of, I mean, it's
it's
not even
underneath
made
the
of sand.
surface, so it's hard
Even
to see.
sand
Yeah.
has,
Yeah.
even sand has like some use, right? The money that we
Right.
have though, it has no use. There's no use to
Yep.
it, right? The only thing that you can use it for is maybe to go to the toilet. Like you can use it as toilet paper, right? You can use it to start fires. You can do that.
Start a fire.
I
Keep
mean,
warm.
at the end of the day, it has no real utility, right? With gold, you can use it as industrial metal. See, that's one of the issues with the current system.
Hmm.
We have a form of money that has no utility and it can be printed out of nothing. Bitcoin is specifically designed to be money. So instead of taking the utility from something else, when we used gold, people couldn't use it for industrial purposes. They couldn't use it for jewelry because people just have it sitting in their safes, in their vaults, right? What's the point of that? What value does that have? That has no value. So in with Bitcoin, we have a pure monetary good, a good that's only used as money. No other use. It has no other use case. What else are you going to use your Bitcoin for? You can't use it as a paperweight. You can't use it as toilet paper. You can't use it as anything, right? It's
Yep.
just money. That's it. It's only money. But what that does is it absorbs all of the speculation from
Mm.
every other asset. So instead of, let's say, houses being used as money, we now just use Bitcoin as money. Instead of gold being used as money, we just use Bitcoin. We use houses as shelter. We use gold as the industrial metal. Sorry, I don't even remember what the question was here, but I think that's one of the things. Go ahead.
No, that it was about the R&D, the incentives that
Yes,
undergird society, and that's
yes,
again
yes, yes.
Bitcoin fixing
So
this everything.
so what we're going to see is those same companies that are like, let's say IKEA, if they start accepting Bitcoin, maybe at some point they can start upgrading the material that they have, right? And they can start charging more. But what Bitcoin does, again, what Bitcoin does is it allows the best producers to charge as many satoshis as possible today by offering a better product or by having a reputation, like a great reputation. Let's say, for example, Microsoft. Microsoft has a pretty good reputation around the world. They have products that everybody wants to use. If they start charging satoshis, man, they'd accumulate so quick. Everybody on Earth would have to pay them in Bitcoin, but that's the thing. Everybody on Earth would have to pay them in Bitcoin, but they'd have to accumulate Bitcoin, and they have to pay it over to Microsoft. It'll pump the price up, and what that'll do is, if we go back to MicroStrategy has Microsoft basically working for them,
Hmm.
right? As Microsoft wants more Bitcoin, micro MicroStrategy's stash goes up in value. Everybody who owns a Bitcoin, their stash goes up in value, right? Um, and the reason why this trickles into, let's say, the research and development is that if you have Bitcoin and you have an increasing purchasing power, then you can take more risks. You can put more time, energy, and effort into creating a better product. And whoever creates the better product is the one who's going to succeed. So let's say, for example, Apple. They have, I've noticed that I've had my phone. I paid for it outright. I've had it for 2 years. Um, at the 2 year mark, exactly at the 2-year mark, my battery started getting worse.
Mm-hmm.
It's so weird. Why is that?
Yep.
Is it because Samsung wants me to upgrade to another phone? Maybe, right? Because if I don't buy another phone and I just keep using this phone, they're not getting the cash flows. If too many
Mm-hmm.
people start doing that, if their phones last too long, then their customers aren't going to come back to them. So they need to screw you over. And again, that's because of that monetary layer at the bottom. It's because of that monetary layer because the savings keep getting debased. You can't save. You need to gamble. You need to invest in other things. Or let's say a company. Let's say there's a shop called Tahini's. I always talk about them. They've just been doing things that other companies probably wouldn't be willing to try because they have Bitcoin. They have a blueberry shawarma. A blueberry shawarma. That's so weird, but people like it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Who like the reason why they can try things like that is because they have Bitcoin. And I'm telling you, over time they're going to try more things, right? And they're going to find more. They're going to fail on certain things, but then they're going to succeed on other things. They're going to they're going to keep trying. They're going to keep throwing their darts at the board until they get that jackpot where they create this new thing that everybody loves, and they lost out on, let's say, 50 things, but this one thing gives them 1,000 times return, so they make up for everything, and then they get that Bitcoin back, and now they have way more wealth. Now they're a bigger company, and that's what Bitcoin allows you to do. It allows you to take risks. It allows you to do the research and development because I think we go back to that art example with from Saifuddin Amus in his
Mm-hmm.
book. He talks about how we don't have real modern art anymore,
Mm-hmm.
great art anymore. Modern art sucks. Basically, that
Yep.
was his point. It's because people, if let's say if it takes you 10 years to create some kind of piece of art, in that 10 years, the money that you've been paid in your contract has already devalued by 50%, 60, 70%. So how are you going to survive? You can't. It's impossible. It's impossible for you to survive. It's impossible to you to think for you to think long term in this system where we have a form of money that's completely getting destroyed and it's designed to be destroyed. So we're not going to get better products. We're not going to be able to put more money into research and development. We can't pay for creative destruction because we just have this system that's very fragile. Bitcoin is anti-fragile because anything can happen. Like I said before, if Satoshi comes and sells all of his Bitcoin or their Bitcoin, Bitcoin's price is going to fall, but it's not going to go to zero.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it'll fall to like 5K, 3K, even
Mm-hmm.
$100, but eventually it'll come back up.
Yep.
And that's the point of that's why Bitcoin is anti-fragile. I don't even think it'll go that low. We saw 80,000 Bitcoin being sold and it only went down by
Right.
$7,000. If
Yeah, a
Satoshi
few
sells all a
percent.
million
Yep.
coins, we're probably going to have so many more whole coiners. All these
Yep.
people who are sitting on the sidelines waiting for 30, 40, 50K. I don't even think it's going to go below that 15, 20K level that we had in the last bear market. If
Mm-hmm.
Satoshi were to sell all of their coins, right? So Bitcoin is
Yep.
anti-fragile. It allows for better research and development. It allows for a better economy. It allows for better products that are designed to last. And the companies that actually create those products are the ones who are going to get Bitcoiners as their customers. We see actually another example here. I see a lot of ranchers who sell really high quality beef
Yeah.
for Bitcoin, and we're seeing more and more of those because and if somebody has the skills to become a rancher, they can do it and they can sell their Bitcoin. And then what happens is if one person goes to them, they share that information with other people, and other people start going to them, and then other people start going, and then over time that rancher can now put more and more time and research into creating a better product, into figuring out how they can raise their cattle better
Mm-hmm.
to provide a better meat. And it just compounds and compounds until at some point we have this society that's built on very, very high quality products, unlike the one that we have today.
It's so well said. It literally is the argument or it's the fight of our time, really. So I mentioned praxeology and Knut in this book, and I'll link to it in here as well. But people have to check it out. It's just it really explains. You start seeing so clearly and easily the arguments that are made, and it's not just Bitcoin or sound money too. It works with anything in life, right? Just how to think, starting from natural law or first principles thinking. And so I want to touch on some altcoins for a quick second, because this is the thing you hear about utility, and this got utility and XRP and Ethereum, we're building meme coins on it, or Solana and this and that. And the one thing that Canute talks about all the time is utility is subjective, and this is where you get like the whole, because this is a perfect segue because you brought this up a minute ago about people have a very hard time believing money can just be money. Like we're all conditioned to think it has to have like some other use case as well. It's got to, gold has to be in your teeth, you know, or like it's got to be doing something else, you know. Like, and money, I use my house as a bank account now, and it can house me, you know, like money, like people can't believe that money is just money, or supposed to just be money, a container for your time and energy. And so it's like, got to have utility. You've got to do this other thing too. And so the whole point of all this is like, there's no such thing as intrinsic value. Like if you polled 8 billion people, every single person would have a different idea of what's valuable to them and what's not valuable to them. So you can't just say, oh, this thing is objectively valuable. That's not, that's not how life works. So going in, you know, just thinking of this in terms of that kind of thinking of coming up from the first principles, you have, again, XRP and some of these other coins that people are continually like, you know, we put up press release after press release, and people get caught up in this all the time. I mean, it was just like Luke Gromen was tweeting about Fartcoin. I think we kind of mentioned this earlier. It's a $1.4 billion market cap. And it's just like, what is happening right now? And people thinking, you know, again, I'm gambling. This thing has utility. Why do people get caught up in these things instead of, you know, listening to what you have been waxing poetic about and just realizing, oh my gosh, like this is so simple and so easy, but instead, nope, I'm out on the risk curve doing, you know, insane, ridiculous things and making up my own definitions of what's happening. Like, can you please explain this to us and make light of this?
I think some of it is unit bias, where
Mm,
people think that if I have one, or if I have a fraction of a Bitcoin versus thousands of Fartcoin, then that
mm,
fraction of a Bitcoin won't grow as much, because one Bitcoin is worth so much more. But I don't know if they understand the just how equilibrium prices are set. If okay, so with Fartcoin, for example, let's say the price goes to, let's say it's 1.4 billion market cap today. If at some point it just skyrockets and it goes up 100x or 1000x, and it goes to 1.4 trillion, what you're going to see is that a lot of supply is going to be sold into the market, because people who bought at these low prices, they're going to sell. This is partly why we have those market cycles as well, right? Even with Bitcoin, if Bitcoin's
mm,
price overnight goes to $20 trillion, we're probably going to see a lot of people selling, because at that point, one Bitcoin will be worth about $1 million, right? We're going to see a lot of people selling. Price will suddenly come down. It'll reach this point where we have support. Let's say it goes to $1 million and it comes back down to 200K. If it goes to $1 million overnight, it'll probably come back down to 200K pretty quick. But then that 200K will be like the new base,
yeah.
right? And this is, have you heard of the concept of Gartner hype cycles?
Yes.
He talks, Vijay talks about it in his book, the bullish, or
The
the
bullish
paper
case.
that he
Yeah.
wrote, the bullish case for Bitcoin. So essentially, what's happening is, in the beginning we have uh some kind of catalyst that makes it so Bitcoin's price actually goes to some crazy price. Let's say some nation state says we're going to buy as many Bitcoin as we can.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to buy 10 million Bitcoin. I don't even know if that's possible at this point, but let's say they say that they're going to buy 10 million Bitcoin. What we're going to see is that a lot of other people are going to front run them. They're going to try to front run them. And we're going to see the price overnight go up like crazy. I don't know how high it'll go, but it'll probably rise massively, right? The people who have Bitcoin today, if they, a lot of people who have Bitcoin today, they don't quite understand it. So we're going to see that the price goes up overnight. Then the people who don't understand Bitcoin, who have thousands of Bitcoin, they're going to sell. They think that, okay, this is the peak. It's never going higher. But what's going to happen after that first country is other countries are going to want it. Then we're going to have pension funds wanting even more. Then we're going to have 401k plans wanting even more Bitcoin, because they know that they can charge an even higher fee on a Bitcoin account, right? So because the returns are going to be a lot higher. So what we're going to see is that price will go up, then it'll come back down, then it'll go back up again, but we'll see a higher and higher base forming. Every time we'll see a higher and higher low, higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, higher lows. Over time, we're going to keep seeing that, and just that's how with shitcoins. See, with shitcoins, that's the difference. With shitcoins, if you have a higher high and it crashes, you may not ever recover again, because if the people who initially had it in the beginning, maybe it had a very, very low float, right? In the beginning, maybe they only released 1% of the supply. So that 1% is what's being traded. And because that 1% is such a small amount compared to the overall total supply, that 1% will be the one, The 1% will be what determines the actual price. So as the price goes up with that 1%, because there's so much less to be bought, the price goes up, and the people who are insiders, the people who had their Bitcoin or their altcoin locked up, they start selling, and then they start bringing the price down. So the float goes from 1% to 2%, then to 3%, then 4%. That's what we're seeing with XRP, right? Over time, XRP and the inside Ripple and the insiders of XRP held 100% of the supply. In the beginning, the Ripple the company received 80% of the supply, and the insiders received 20%. So now, in that period, in that, I think since 2018, 2017, whenever it was created, in that period, they've gone from 100% to 55% or 50%, something like that, 50% maybe. And we see Brad Garlinghouse selling $200 million worth of XRP. Why is it that people are buying XRP, but Brad Garlinghouse is buying none? It's because he has a stack. He needs exit liquidity. He needs people to buy his shitcoin. He had expected that the US government will probably start a strategic digital asset reserve, which includes XRP, but it didn't happen. And I mean, now the retail is the ones that are going to deal with it, right? They're going to have to buy all of the XRP that comes into the market. If they don't, the price comes down. If retail doesn't accept the lies that XRP is decentralized, then XRP goes to zero. And that's what we see with all shitcoins. With Fartcoin, for example, if it goes up 100x, it'll probably come back down 99%. And then when it's down 99%, maybe it never recovers again. A lot of the majority of shitcoins actually do that. I think there's something like 15 million shitcoins now, and then one Bitcoin, wow. Right? More and more shitcoins can be created at any point. Nobody can stop that from happening. But what we're going to see is that in terms of Bitcoin, all those shitcoins are going to trend to zero. And we see Bitcoin's dominances keep increasing and increasing. And at 62% today, right? Eventually it'll be at 70%, maybe next cycle, when more people lose trust in everything else. Then it'll be 80%. I don't think it'll ever be 100% because there will always be a group of people who are willing to gamble on random altcoins. But over time, I think it'll trend to 100%. So it doesn't really matter. You don't need anything else. You just need Bitcoin. You don't need financial engineering. You don't need to take on leverage. If you don't, I personally like leverage because I think Bitcoin's going to go a lot higher. But I'm not saying that everybody should use it, right? If you're using leverage, keep in mind that you could lose more money than you put in because you borrowed money to buy your Bitcoin. But if you just buy Bitcoin with your cash, the maximum amount of money that you can lose is what you put in. So if you take on leverage, take it on with the right mindset that you're going to hold for a long term. If you don't plan to hold for 4 years, you probably shouldn't be buying Bitcoin in the first place. If you don't plan to hold Bitcoin for 4 years, don't take on leverage. I would not say that you should.
Did you see the Lynn Alden shared a meme like in the last day or two? It was and she shared it. I just saw it on her account, but I think it's being shared by someone else or someone else made it. And it was the four squares of like Trump and Powell, and he's like putting on his glasses, looking at the thing, and then he was there at the Fed looking at the renovations they're doing at the Fed, and it just says nothing stops this train. And and it's her, it's her whatever slogan she's been talking about the last handful of years, really. And someone made a meme of it. Anyway, it's just hilarious, and it's just like the sign of the times. You just made me think of that. What would you say to like Gen Y, Gen Z? Obviously, the crowd under 45 will say we see a lot of people that are in that demographic that they want some type of hope, but they want to make an impact, right? Like they're not working to like, everyone wants to try to make the money they're worth or whatever, but it's more, again, as we see, they want to feel impact. They want to feel like they're making a difference. They want to, something more. And how do we, as educators and people that are putting out content, like how do we reach those people and say, hey, Bitcoin is literally the greatest humanitarian effort you could ever undertake. No amount of protesting, there's nothing you can do that's going to even come close to the impact of defunding the corrupt legacy inflationary monetary system that you are in, with all the incentives that you have, so beautifully laid out here. How do we start educating a group of people that this, is it just gonna be the 3% of people, like kind of like the Revolutionary War, where it was just a couple of people that took up arms, were like, hey, we're going to battle, and everyone else is just like, like I'm kind of, whatever, lukewarm? Or are we gonna get to 50%, 40% of people who get it? Like, how do you see this playing out when it seems so easy and so perfect right there, but yet so hard at the same time? Like, how do you see this playing out?
I actually don't see most people adopting Bitcoin. I don't see
Mm-hmm.
that much. I see most people
Same.
ignoring Bitcoin for a very long time. Even
Yeah.
for fiat,
Same.
right? They don't understand fiat either, right? The
Right.
people who say that, oh, I don't understand Bitcoin, they don't understand fiat either, but they're using it every day, right? So the way
Yep.
that I see it, the majority of people won't have self custody. Even self custody is limited to a very small number of people compared to everybody on Earth, just based on the number of transactions that we have, and that's a reality, right? We don't need every single person on Earth to be on the base layer of money. The base layer of money is going to be for the people who are actually who understand Bitcoin, who know what it is, what it represents. It's going to be for the people with integrity who then create other layers of Bitcoin for other people to transact on, right? So I think the way that I see it, if you're in Bitcoin right now, you're at that point where you can actually take self custody. And if you're in Bitcoin right now and you're millennial, if you're Gen Z, if you're Gen Alpha not yet, but at some point the best thing that you're going to be able to do is help other people to understand this thing, right? That's basically what we're doing. My main goal here
Yep.
is to help people understand it and to get ahead of all of these institutions that are going to come into Bitcoin. Inevitably, it's not you're not going to be able to avoid that. It's going to happen. You can ignore Bitcoin, but it's not going away, right? So all these companies are going to come into Bitcoin. I think the best thing the average person can do, they probably can't start their own treasury company, but the best thing that the average person can do is number one, teach people about Bitcoin. Number two, stack Bitcoin for your family, right? You don't have to just stack it for yourself. Sometimes your family will ignore you, but that doesn't mean you ignore them, right? You don't just leave them to suffer, because if they don't buy Bitcoin now, eventually they're going to be working for it. So if you stack Bitcoin for them, I think that's a great decision. If you can help other people to stack Bitcoin, I think that's amazing as well. Because if let's say, for example, if we didn't have if people didn't have their YouTube channels, I wouldn't be here, right? If Safety didn't write his book, I wouldn't be here.
Same.
If Jeff Booth didn't do so many podcasts, I wouldn't understand most of the things that I do today about Bitcoin, right? That content made me dig deeper, and it's about the different perspectives, right? They can repeat the same thing over and over again. Me and you probably have the same thing being said over and over again in our channels, but the thing
Yep.
is that it comes from a different
Different ways.
perspective.
Yep.
Everybody
Yep.
understands things differently. Everybody has their own angle to do things, to understand things, to say things, right? Everybody has their own experience. Like, let's say, for example, somebody who's somebody who's from India may relate to me a little bit more, while
Mm-hmm.
somebody who's I'm not trying to make this racial, but let's say somebody who's white, maybe they
Right.
relate to you more, right?
Right.
Somebody who's like I've noticed there's this guy named CJ Johnson. Have you heard of him? CJ Johnson on
I don't
Twitter.
know.
He runs Wealth Squad.
Okay.
So he has Wealth Squad. He runs a massive group. He's helped a lot of people to study Bitcoin, but I think a lot of the people who follow him are black, right? Because
Mm.
he's black, they
Yep.
relate with him, right? And that's perfectly fine. Everybody
Yep.
has their own
That's what
biases,
we
and
need.
that's okay.
Yeah.
So if
Yep.
you, let's say, for example, if you are literally anybody, you have your own perspective, right? If you're
Yep.
from India, you have a different perspective. If you're from Germany, you have a different perspective. If you're from China, you have a different perspective. So share your perspective. You don't know how people will be able to relate. You don't know how people I don't know how people can relate to me over you, for example, right? I don't know how people relate to you over me.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody comes together and just they create that picture of
Yeah.
what Bitcoin is, and it becomes more solidified, and the more people understand it and more people look at it, more people see where it could go, because different perspectives come in and teach about Bitcoin from their own point of view, from their own lens. So what I would say is to Gen X, even Gen X, late Gen X, maybe even early Gen X. I mean, everybody really, even baby boomers, right? Everybody can do this. Baby boomers could be helping their friends, right, to study Bitcoin. I've seen videos from baby boomers who talk about Bitcoin, and their videos are going insanely well,
Mm-hmm.
and that's amazing, because they're helping more people. Even 100 views. That's 100 people that you could have potentially gotten down the rabbit hole to study what Bitcoin is. And I'm not doing this because I need exit liquidity. I don't. Because if I wanted to sell my
Right.
Bitcoin MicroStrategy, we'll buy it all.
Right.
Right. Right.
You and I
That's
don't move the market. Let's just say that.
exactly.
Yeah,
We don't
exactly.
move the market. Our
Yep.
audience doesn't move the market. But
No.
what we can do is we can move that individual's perspective of what the world is going to do. Right. If I help one person, that person's entire life is changed
Yeah.
completely. Right. There was this guy who actually I'll go back a little bit. I used to do this webinar. I used to charge $50 for it, and I thought, oh, it's over. I'm charging too much. People would complain. They'd say, oh, you're charging too much. But I kept doing it. And eventually, that webinar, there were something like 2,500 people who took it, who paid me $50 for it. And there was one guy who booked a meeting with me right after, and he's like, after I watched this webinar, I bought 30 Bitcoin. 30 Bitcoin
Wow.
after he watched the webinar, right? And I'm never going to get to 30 Bitcoin, right? I'm never he paid me $50 and now he's benefited more from Bitcoin than I ever will. Right? To me, that's I love it. I'm happy that happened because that's 30 Bitcoin that MicroStrategy can't buy. Right? Even if somebody can buy 0.1 Bitcoin, 0.2 Bitcoin, 0.3, whatever they can buy, 0.01 Bitcoin, if they're put on the right path because of your content, I think then you deserve to be very, they should be happy with what you did, right? And they should pass it on, right? There was this guy who had a meeting with me a few weeks ago. He was a doctor. He was talking to me about Bitcoin. He was asking me, should I buy Bitcoin? He had a little bit already, and he had a massive real estate portfolio. I think he had like 15 houses. He sold 10 houses after having conversations with me about Bitcoin.
Wow.
To buy Bitcoin. Right?
Incredible.
That's 10 houses that came back on the market that are not held by this one institution or this one real estate investor. A lot of them probably went to end users of houses, people who are actually going to live in them. Some of them probably went to other real estate investors, and that's perfectly fine. But what this guy did was he gave away those houses, and now he owns Bitcoin. Now he owns the best asset in the world. These are the kinds of things that you're going to see. So I would recommend that anybody watching this, make your own channel. It's not oversaturated. Don't fall for that.
No.
Just do it, right? Nobody can compete with you. You create your own value, and people will, if you can create something of value, people will watch it.
So well said. I could not agree more. For years, I was like, we need 10,000 more Bitcoin content creators. Like you said, everyone's got a different voice. Everyone has a different modality they're good at. Writing, video, audio. All these different things. So it's like we need so much more education out there. It's really the only way. And
it's not like you can only watch one content creator, right? Like people can watch my videos, they can watch your videos, they can add 20 more content creators.
Yes.
Right? They can add 100 more content creators to their list. It's not like everybody's posting every day. Some people post I post a video every day, but not everybody's doing that, right? Some people, you don't have to watch every single one of my videos. You can watch, like, there's different perspectives for everything, right? Everybody can just, like, if you learn about things from different perspectives, and this is one of the things that I learned from traveling to other parts of the world. There are different ways to look at things, right? You can't just go with how you look at things. The world doesn't work that way. There are way more ways to look at things. There are way more angles that you can look at things at, and it'll all change your perspective. And that's what this content creator discussion does, right? More content creators mean more perspectives, means more people who have a deeper knowledge of Bitcoin, and it completely changes the entire market.
100%. It just reaches different corners of the earth. It's just so needed, and we're just so early still. And that's the thing. Like, that's the thing that everyone has to understand. We all have to understand how early it truly is. Like you said earlier, I agree that most people won't get it because, like you said, most people don't understand fiat. And I think that's the greatest example. Like, most people don't understand the system they're in now. Cutscene, everyone's using a currency that robs them every single day. So, like, clearly people don't know the monetary system now. So you can't expect them to really understand Bitcoin going forward. So in saying that, I know, like, the Bitcoin, the Bitcoin bill, and Cynthia Loomis is working on stuff. There's all kinds of things going on. I've always been a believer that the Trojan horse has to get inside government to start defunding the government and start flipping the incentives. But at the same time, I'm a believer of that, but I also I fall more on the side of maybe say an Eric Cason or, some of the cypherpunks of like, no, like give government, like, don't let them touch it at all. Like get them the heck out of here. So like I'm at odds with myself, and I've really wrestled with this back and forth. And my question is, I think I can't grasp, and I would love your take on this, is that how do you build this incentive? Like it's a noble goal to want all the plebs to get it first, but in reality, like the biggest institutions in the world and the governments, like these people are eventually gonna get their hands on it. Like you can't expect only like plebs to understand what's going on, and then all these other entities that have a lot of the smartest people in the world in them not to get it. So the question I have is, how do you build this parallel system in Bitcoin, which is happening to a large extent, but then also have the government and these people are just over here doing legacy fiat traditional life, and then we're over here building this thing furiously like little elves up in the North Pole, and then all of a sudden we just show up one day, we're like, hey guys, we got this new system, it's all completely built, and like we don't need your old one anymore, here it is, like, and we just take over all of a sudden. Like that's the thing I can't square, and I feel like naturally it has to be this evolution over time of you incept it into the government, and then you start changing the politicians and their incentives, and they realize, well, why the hell am I here? What am I doing? I should just go start a business and accumulate more Bitcoin. Why am I in the government? Like what is your thought on that? Because this is something I've had people yell at me like, why are you talking about a Bitcoin bill? We don't need Bitcoin bills. Bitcoin doesn't need government needs Bitcoin. And I'm like, I know, I get it, but like no one has an answer for me. Like no one, like what is the answer? You have to like square that circle somehow, and I don't think anyone really understands that. So I would love your thoughts on this. This is something I'm gonna start asking people going forward, because it's something I've really wrestled with.
I think it's just like Bitcoin's price, right? Higher highs and higher lows. So in the beginning, you had everybody who, I mean, at some point, nobody understood Bitcoin,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because Bitcoin wasn't created at that point. Maybe
Yeah.
Satoshi, that was one person out of 8 billion. Then at
Yeah.
some point, you had 10 people understand. Then you have 100 people. Then you have 1,000 people. Then you have 10,000 people, and it keeps growing and growing. So at some point, the U.S. government, nobody in the U.S. government understood what Bitcoin was. Now I would guarantee you that everybody in the U.S. government has heard of Bitcoin, right? There are still people who are very, very against it, but then there are also people who are very, very bullish on it, right? So we went from 0 to, let's say, 3, like on average. Let's say some people understand it very well, most people don't understand it at all, but they've heard of it, right? At some point we'll go to a 5, where more people understand it very well and fewer people don't understand it at all. Eventually at some point
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be nobody who doesn't understand it at all, right?
Yeah.
And what I mean by higher highs and higher lows is on that basis of knowledge, right? So over time, the average amount of knowledge is going to increase. It went from 0 to, let's say, 1, 2, 5, 10, 20, 50. And at some point, we're going to have, like, at some previously we had, let's say, um, have you heard the news where people were saying that the US government actually has like 30,000 Bitcoin, but they're
Yeah.
supposed to
It's
have
not the 200 or
200,000?
whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So they still have 30,000. They don't have 0. At some point they had 0.
Mm-hmm.
So what I mean here is that we're going to have people who are against Bitcoin, and we're going to have people who are for Bitcoin. But as more Bitcoiners enter office, as more people figure out what Bitcoin is, we're going to have fewer and fewer people rejecting Bitcoin and rejecting bills that are supposed to be bullish for Bitcoin. But again,
Mm-hmm.
I agree with what people are saying, right? The
Right.
Bitcoin doesn't need the US government. If the
Right.
US government rejects Bitcoin, it's perfectly fine. Maybe it'll delay
Right.
the adoption process a little bit, 5, 10 years, whatever. Who cares? I
Mm-hmm.
don't care. I'm okay with that. I
Yep.
know that the US government needs a Bitcoin, and Bitcoin doesn't need the US government.
Yep.
Eventually, like McDonald's rejected Bitcoin, David Ramsey
Yeah.
Dave Ramsey rejected Bitcoin, Microsoft rejected Bitcoin. At some point, they're not going to be able to get the amount of Bitcoin that they could get when they rejected it, right? You buy Bitcoin at the price you deserve. So if the US government rejects Bitcoin, whatever, they're going to, if they want to buy 1 million Bitcoin today, maybe it'll cost them what? A million Bitcoin will cost them, what is that?
Uh,
$10 billion?
billion. Yeah. I was gonna say billion, 10 billion. Yeah.
$10 billion, something like that. Yeah, $10 billion,
Yep.
$12 billion. So today it'll cost them $12 billion.
Yep.
At
Yeah.
some point, it'll cost them $120 billion. At some point, it'll cost them $1.2
Yep.
trillion. At some point, they won't be able to get 1 million Bitcoin. It'll be impossible, right? Today, we have companies like, if you look at the top asset classes in the world, or the top assets in the world, you see that, let's say NVIDIA. Okay, so NVIDIA, I'm just looking at the numbers here. NVIDIA is worth
Mm-hmm.
$4.27 trillion. That means Nvidia is worth 35 million Bitcoin, right?
It's
Does that
insane.
make sense?
Yeah, that
There's
is
only 21
insane.
million, right? So what's
Right.
happening here, right? So what's happening here is over time we have higher highs and higher lows for the number of people who are willing to accept Bitcoin. More and more people are willing to accept it, and then as the price, if the price comes down, some of them are like, okay, no, I don't want this anymore. But then other people replace them. So
Yep.
I think it's what you said, the Trojan horse. Once somebody's elected, like let's say Trump is elected, he can't do it.
Hmm.
Who's going to stop him from doing whatever he wants?
Right.
He's been doing whatever he's gone completely against what he ran, the platform he ran on. He said no war. He's supporting war, right? Other things that people have said that he's doing and he said that he wouldn't do. I don't know what they are.
Yep.
I haven't really paid attention, but I know about the war thing, right? So over time, you're going to see people who are saying that I don't. We're not gonna make a serious. We're not going to please a certain number of people. They're going to say we're not serious about Bitcoin, and then they can go into office and they can be completely serious about Bitcoin. They can change everything,
Yeah.
right? People can lie, um, but over time, I think what we're going to see is that more and more people who are in the government are going to accept Bitcoin. They're going to understand Bitcoin. They're going to have Bitcoin for themselves. If they don't, then they're going to lose.
Mm.
They're not going to have wealth. They're not going to have the best access, the access to the best asset in the world, right? They're not going to be able to build wealth like other people. And the people who have Bitcoin, they're going to be able to market themselves more, right? They're going to be able to run a better campaign because they have Bitcoin to pay for it, and that just makes them more powerful. So I think what you were saying is going to be correct. We're going to see more and more people going into the government who are studying Bitcoin, who have figured out what it is, who actually want the U.S. to be um, to continue to be the superpower of the world. But if the U.S. government, they know that if the U.S. government doesn't adopt Bitcoin, then it won't be the superpower of the world. So I do think that over time we'll have politicians in office who want to talk about Bitcoin, who want to push Bitcoin adoption, who want to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve, and who are willing to use some of the assets that the U.S. government has, some of the income that the U.S. government is getting to buy Bitcoin. I don't know if that's happened yet. I don't think it is. I mean, it isn't public if it has, but at some point it will. And who knows? Maybe at that point the U.S. government doesn't have they don't have the resources to buy 1 million Bitcoin. But the later that gets, the more difficult it'll be. Like I said, at some point it'll cost 1.2 trillion, then it'll cost 12 trillion, then it'll cost 120 trillion, right? It'll keep going up. The number will keep rising until at some point again back to the main concept. Bitcoin runs out at every price.
Mm-hmm.
Those chunks of 1 million Bitcoin are going to run out. There's only 21 of them, right? Not even 21, 20, because there isn't even 21 million full Bitcoin. A lot of Bitcoin are lost. Strategy is not going to sell their Bitcoin. Satoshi Nakamoto is probably not going to sell their Bitcoin. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of that Bitcoin is already gone. People who have held Bitcoin for a while, I think something like 70% of it is held by individuals who've
Yep.
held for a very long time. They're
Yep.
probably not going to sell, right? Why would they sell to the US government? If they understand what Bitcoin is, why would they want dollars for it? So at some
Yep.
point, what you're going to see is less and less Bitcoin is being sold. People are going to have to sell. They're going to have to sell less of their Bitcoin in order to sustain their lifestyle.
Yep.
And
And
it just I don't know. I don't know how people don't get it. I don't know how people don't see it.
I think one of the big things that, again, it's hard to see or hard to fathom in a way, but there are, like you said, 70+% of the private individuals own the Bitcoin, and that transfer of wealth will happen and has to happen
Yeah.
from these massive entities, corporations, countries, nation states, sovereign, wealth funds, to those individuals, because a lot of those people, like you said, won't sell. They won't sell at 1 million. They're not going to sell at 5. They might 10. You might be talking 50 million, 100 million per coin. Like, then, some of these people will sell at these points, but what then happens by necessity, those people now start becoming the wealthiest people, or they are the wealthiest people in the world, but that now they're saying, hey, I'm taking this and I'm quickly turning it into my campaign fund, because I'm going in to actually take the government and I'm going to reduce it to the size it should be. And I think that's the thing that's hard for the average person, and even a lot of Bitcoiners, to kind of extrapolate out and see. Like, there's a lot of us that will eventually, as a kid, I thought about being in office or something like that. So It's someday if I'm fortunate enough to have that level of wealth or whatever it is, and it's like, no, I'm going to go use a fraction of that. I'm going to go do my job to reduce this world down to what this government world down to what it should be. I think that's one of those things that doesn't get talked about very often, but that is coming. Like people are going to reduce things down to size because the Bitcoiners, liberty minded, sovereign minded, libertarian, whatever you want to call, those people are coming and they're going to have a lot of wealth transferred to them from these entities that are saying, hey, would you pay, or would you sell for 10 million? Would you sell for 20 million? Would you sell for 30 million? And then these hardcore people are gonna be like, I'll do it for 100, 50 million, 25 million, 200 million. And then there you go. Now they have the power. So I think
But
that's,
even then, they're not gonna have to sell all their Bitcoin.
no,
They're gonna keep majority of it, right? They're gonna
because
sell
it's going to be
maybe
quick.
half a percent.
Yeah. I'm going to fund my campaign, or it's
Yeah,
going to be like in and out. You're
yeah,
not going to, most of it will be Bitcoin still. Yeah.
yeah.
It's absolutely insane. And I think there's a time mismatch too with a lot of this. Like people, we conflate like times. Like George Gammon always talks about this of like, it's an education problem. We did, him and the Jeff Bate, the boots over time, they agree on 98% of the stuff. But, George is caught up on the, we just got to educate people over time. And it's like, well, George, how are you going to out propagandize the state? The state has the currency printer right now. So how are you going to out educate them with their endless amounts of currency going to intel agencies, going to schools, going to media outlets? How are you going to out propagandize that? You can't out educate the mass public through an entity that has an endless currency printer. So you have to rip that away from them somehow before you start really educating people long term. So yeah, that to me is a massive issue that people have a hard time grappling with as well. And it's going to take time. Like you said, it's going to take a little time for this to kind of play out. It's not some iceberg flipping overnight. The price moves could change, but the education still is going to lag even at that. Like if we go to $1 million tomorrow, it's not like, oh, all of a sudden like people get Bitcoin, or 10, you could go to 10 million tomorrow, but it still doesn't mean anything. Like people still won't understand what's going on. And that's the thing I think that's going to take time.
The price is just a number, right? It's
Yeah.
not like people
Like
are
you said earlier.
like,
Yeah.
if it goes to $1 million, a lot of people, like, the flip isn't going to switch for most people.
Yeah.
They don't care. It's
Yep.
at 120K. Most people still don't care.
Right.
Right. If you talk to people right now on the street, how many people are going to know what Bitcoin is? Probably like less than 5%, right? Something that I do, this is something weird. I don't know, maybe it's my my little ADHD side, the neurodivergent in me. I try to think about how many people in the room that I'm in actually understand it, and
Same.
I'm just guessing, like, it's probably less than 2 to 3%, right? Less than, even probably way less than that, even like less than 1% actually understand Bitcoin, and I'm probably the majority of it, right? Even I don't understand it all the way,
Yep.
right? Like even I'm understanding, I'm learning new things every single day, right? And that's that's what shows you how early we are. There's people who, I mean, there is going to be a lot more buyers at $1 million than there are at 100 million at 100K, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they understand it. Even the people who own a ton of Bitcoin. There was a guy at the conference. He was sitting next to me. He talked to me for a bit. He asked me, "Oh, do I?" He's like, "I recognize you." And we were talking for a bit, and he was saying how he's been in Bitcoin since 2016, and when I think it was Michael Saylor who talked about hash rate on he had it on the screen, and I turned to this guy, and he was googling what is hash power or what is hash rate. And keep in mind, he's been in Bitcoin, and he probably has like 100 Bitcoin. He's been in Bitcoin, he has a ton of it, and he doesn't know what hash rate is.
It's incredible.
That's what shows you how early we are.
Mm-hmm.
Most people have no clue about the majority of, like, I would guarantee you that 99% of people, 99.999% of people can't explain the difficulty adjustment. Maybe more than that, right? Out of 8 billion people on Earth, there's probably maybe 10, 20, 50,000 people who can explain the difficulty adjustment.
Yep.
Like there are people out there who claim to understand what Bitcoin is, but they don't even know that there's 21 million Bitcoin, right? And that's fundamental. Like that's the basis of everything. If you don't know what 21, if you don't know that there's 21 million Bitcoin, then you don't understand Bitcoin. Like that's it, because that finite supply is the basis that Bitcoin is built on. So the education, I agree with you. I think the education is going to be very difficult without the people who actually understand Bitcoin having enough wealth to spread it.
Hmm.
And I think YouTube is changing that. Like, think about it. Our
I agree.
podcasts,
Yep.
my content, your content, so
Yep.
many more people are understanding Bitcoin because of it, and they're starting their own. It's a mind virus, right? It can expand forever.
Yes.
I noticed that you reached. I think you're above 10,000 subscribers now. Congrats on
Yeah.
that.
Just,
It's
yeah.
huge.
Thank you.
But
Just
but
crossed
you
12.
have
Yeah.
amazing, right? But you
Yep.
have
Yep.
over 8 billion people who can potentially listen to you. So think about how
Yep.
early you are,
So early.
right? And we'll keep going
Yep.
forever. Like as at some point, I do think that our content is going to be obsolete because people are just going to be using
Yeah.
Bitcoin on a day
Yep.
to day basis. But
Yep.
even then, people are probably going to be referring back to our videos thinking, wow, how did these guys know so early? Like,
Hmm.
how did these guys know in 2025, 2024 that this is where things are going? But that's the thing. Everybody can just look at it. They can open their eyes and they can figure it out. We just seem like we know, like we know, like we're right and we can predict the future, but we can't, right? We're just going based on logic. Like even we don't know what we don't know. Things could still go wrong, but I mean, I think what we're doing is we're putting our faith into our knowledge and our understanding of Bitcoin. And my like most of the time that I'm researching Bitcoin at this point is to see what could go wrong, where it could fail, and I haven't really found anything.
Yeah. Same. That's the rabbit hole you go down, right? For years and years and years, you just one thing after another. It's just like, well, what about this? Well, what about that? And then you
Yeah,
eventually just run out of things that you're like, I like, and then
yeah.
you start, So I want to get your thoughts on Bitcoin treasury companies. So we talked about Sailor. We've kind of like danced around Sailor numerous times during the episode, and just things like that. But whether it's Metaplanet, Similar Scientific, obviously Sailor, and just all the things that are going on. Nakamoto. You've got 21. You have all these things going on. What are your thoughts on just the treasury companies in general and what you're seeing? And do you think we're going to have some type of blow up at some point? Maybe it's a year down the line or whatever it is, and there's people jumping on at the last second. Maybe it's that. Like when you kind of see this space and what's happening, it feels like it's kind of like the new altcoin phase almost in a way. Like you can start seeing it building. I know people are talking about that. So when you kind of look at the landscape, what do you see?
I don't see it being like altcoins because altcoins had no substance, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
let's say for example, all these companies
I
that
should say
are
the fervor
accumulating,
or the energy. Yeah.
yeah, like they don't
Yep.
these companies that are accumulating Bitcoin, they're accumulating something that's actually of value. They're
Mm-hmm.
buying this asset that will increase in value over time, and even if they like in the bear market they do fall a lot, at some point they're going to recover because Bitcoin like that the Bitcoin that they have is the floor price,
Yep.
right? So people talk about the NAV, the net asset value with Bitcoin. Uh, I think that the number should be a lot higher than the net asset value because, let's say, for example, I think that the NAV should be higher for a lot of these companies because, let's say, for example, MicroStrategy, their moat is owning so much Bitcoin, right? So we
Yep.
have like all these companies. Maybe if maybe if Bitcoin just falls, how much do you think it'll even fall at this point? Like how much do you next bear market? Do you think it could still do the 80%? Obviously, we don't have a
I
crystal
could
ball,
see.
but what do you think?
Yeah, I could see 50 to 70. Something like that.
50 to 70. I think that
That could.
sounds about right.
Yeah. I
Right.
mean,
But
something like that.
at that point, if they still have the Bitcoin and they haven't over leveraged themselves and they've structured their debt in the right way, why would they have to sell?
Yeah.
Unless they don't understand Bitcoin, like unless they sell out of fear. I think maybe GameStop might sell their Bitcoin. They bought like 5,000 or something like that. They might sell their Bitcoin. I wouldn't be surprised because it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't seem like the CEO really understands what Bitcoin is. But
Right.
let's say MicroStrategy, why would they have to sell? Let's say Nakamoto, why would they have to sell? They were the sponsor of the Bitcoin conference. They're not going to sell. They'll find ways to get money to hold on to that Bitcoin, right? They can borrow against their Bitcoin if anything, and then they can use that to pay for their liabilities, right? So I don't know. I don't know if they're going to have to sell. It's definitely possible, but I mean the the base price for these companies should be the Bitcoin price. We're going to see points where it's the multiple, the price of the value of the company is a very high multiple of the amount of Bitcoin that they have at some point. But then we'll also see it dip. We'll see it come up. Then we'll see it dip. But if you think about it, if let's say the NAV drops below, if it drops below 1, technically they could sell their Bitcoin and they could buy their shares back. I don't think that would be worth it, but they could, right? At that point, you're basically buying Bitcoin at pennies on the dollar. So what'll happen is, I think the stocks will be bought back, but who knows? I don't fully know. A lot of people don't really like these treasury companies, but everything is good for Bitcoin, the way that I see it. If these companies, even if these companies buy a ton of Bitcoin, eventually they have to do something with it, right? So either they sell that Bitcoin back into the market, they use it to borrow, they hire the best talent, maybe they build a better layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, whatever the layers are. Maybe they build the next Visa, right? And that Bitcoin treasury will allow them to do that. The way that I see it, the Bitcoin is just capital, right? It's just a way for them
Mm-hmm.
to, they're just in the accumulation phase at this point. For all we know, all these companies could become Bitcoin banks, right?
Mm-hmm.
For all we know,
Yeah.
they could, let's say, what's the company? Metaplanet, yes, MTP,
Yeah.
yeah. For all we know, let's say at some point, Bitcoin's growth rate drops to 5% because we're now on a Bitcoin standard. Who knows? Maybe they have so much Bitcoin that they can use that capital to build the best hotel company in the world, right? At some point, those companies are probably going to go back to doing whatever they were doing before, and they're going to be the best at it. Um, Metaplanet is the hotel company. MicroStrategy used to do SaaS, software as a service. Who knows? Maybe they'll because they have so much Bitcoin, maybe they'll create the next layer of Bitcoin, right? And they have like 600,000 Bitcoin locked up already. Lightning only has 5,000 Bitcoin locked up. I think Liquid has like 6,000 Bitcoin or something like that. MicroStrategy has more Bitcoin than both of these layer twos combined, and that gives them leverage, right? For all we know, they could be the next Bitcoin insurance company. They could be, um, they could be, they could create, like I said, layers on top of Bitcoin. There's so many things that could happen. It's capital, right? It's untainted capital. They can do whatever they want with it. That's the point, right? They can do literally whatever they want with it. They can create the biggest company in the world. They could create the most value possible, and nobody can really stop them from doing that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And this goes back to a little bit of I know the pushback people get is, well, that's not real Bitcoin. You're not owning Bitcoin. It's a stock in a company. And of course that's true. Like people have to, so I have to give that disclaimer of, yeah, clearly like it's not Bitcoin and self-custody is the best thing anyone could do, obviously. Right. But it's like, if people are stuck in their, whatever, they're, again, like we talked about earlier, retirement plans or whatever the heck's going on, is the next best thing to do? Maybe not. It depends on each person. Is it, like, could these people become banks? That's the thing. I mean, Hal Finney talked about banks too. People get all up in arms about, like, we're not going to have banks. We're not going to have governments in the future. And it's like, again, I empathize with that, because I do come from that ilk of like anarchist, libertarian, like all, like, I get that. I think the problem at times with Bitcoiners is that we're so entrepreneurial at times, and we're so like on the fringe of society, and we're like pushing society, but society is generally, and I say this humbly, like they're very far behind what we are doing and what people are doing in the Bitcoin space. And you have a lot of the weaponized autists, like we joke about all the time, like, a lot of us are crazy. We are extreme. We're, there's something probably off with us a little bit. We're like, whatever, like, so like we're so far out there that the average, the society is just like way lagging behind. So it's like, yes, we have this vision of the future, but that's not going to happen today. It's not going to happen tomorrow. Probably not going to happen next week or next month or next year. We can keep working toward that, but to think we're not going to have banks, or we're not going to have governments, Bitcoin banks, things like that, like these things will happen, to your point. And does it shape the incentives of society where we start treating each other better? There's less war because we're not incentivized to do that anymore. Yeah. So hopefully there are very small governments and banks and things like that. They're good actors, and they're much better actors because they are the incentives are such that we are on this monetary bedrock where it behooves you, and you're incentivized, and you're actually rewarded for acting correctly instead of against the consumers and producers at odds with each other. So anyway, that's that has to just kind of be said as well. To your point, I wanted to kind of amplify what you were saying in just a different way, I guess. But
Yeah.
anyway, so I want to get your thoughts on price and just where you think things are headed in terms of this cycle, or maybe even this decade. You can kind of take it which direction you want, but are we going to have super cycles in your mind? Do you think we won't have super cycles ever? Do you are you like, hey, I'm a Jeff Booth, 900 trillion. It's the whole market cap of Bitcoin. That's the end game for Bitcoin. Is it more like a Peter Dunworth thing, or is it Jack Mahler's one half of every trade? It's 450 trillion. Is that so? Like, where do you stand on all of that as you look out across the horizon and say, this is where I think it's headed? And again, like we said, price is the noisy part of Bitcoin. It is the one of the big marketing arms of Bitcoin. That's what draws people in, and then they get orange pilled. Fortunately, many people do. So where do you see this, I guess, going forward in the next 6 to 12 months, and also kind of when you look out 10 years or so?
So I think over the next 6 to 12 months, we're probably going to continue to have the slow grind up that we've had in the last little while. If you look at the charts, you can see that Bitcoin's going
Power
up,
law
coming down,
style.
going up.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Like power law style, kind of like that.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think there is less volatility, but the returns are still there. Right? It can still like it's like I mentioned before,
More
right?
orderly.
The dollar can keep losing 99% every single year. So in terms of Bitcoin, the dollar can keep losing 30, 40, 50% per year forever. So I would be surprised if like it so okay, so I was running the numbers yesterday. Somebody said $1 million in 15 years. If that's the price that we see in a million years or in 15 years, is it even worth holding Bitcoin? Of course it is, because Bitcoin would have given you a 15% annual return, while like the S&P 500 probably would give you a 10% return, right? But that's a very bearish return on Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Right now, Bitcoin's giving you 50, 60, 70%. So who's gonna? How do you know that that's not gonna stay? That's not gonna keep happening. The 50, 60, 70% per year. Even Michael Saylor, he says 30% per year, but he's buying as much Bitcoin as he can. He's like he himself could be pumping the price up, right? So if he's buying as much Bitcoin as he can, and then on top of that, there's a bunch of other people who want to buy as much Bitcoin as they can. He thinks Bitcoin is going to $13 million in 2040 or 2042 or whatever it was. So I mean, I honestly don't know where it could go, right? I guessed a while ago, maybe over a year ago, that Bitcoin's price would maybe it'll go to 250K this cycle, but for all we know, I mean, it could go much higher. I think it could go to 1 million, right? Maybe the 4-year cycles are gone. Maybe instead of having 4-year cycles, we have multiple pumps of 50%, then drops of 30%. So 50% up, 30% down, 50% up, 30% down. And it keeps doing that over, or even like 20% down, right? Whatever the numbers work out to be, 70% up, 80% up, 30% down, right? And that could keep happening over and over again. Maybe it'll bore the hell out of people. And the majority of people who don't understand Bitcoin just forget about it. And then they remember it again when it's at $1 million, right? And then they can't get it under $1 million again. I honestly, I don't know what's going to happen to the price. Nobody really knows. The best thing we can do is guess. I would say that, I mean, I think it's just going to go up. I don't know how much. I don't know when it'll keep going up until, I think it could literally go up until the US dollar is collapsed. But who knows when that happens, right? For all we know, that could take 30 years. And in 30 years, one Bitcoin could be $1 billion. And that's the point when nobody wants US dollars anymore.
No bid on the US dollar.
Yeah, exactly.
That day's coming.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I think so, right?
Yeah, I do too. I mean, like you said earlier, I mean, like that. I remember a couple of years ago, I tweeted out, and I got a bunch of pushback, and it was like, I'm trying to think it was probably around 2020 or 2021 or something like that. It was like the dollar's lost 99% of purchasing power since 1913, and it can lose 99% more, in the next, decade. It was like something, and it was like, people are like, what do you mean? Like, it's like, and you touched on this earlier, like we're in the exponential debt part of the cycle. Like the debt is going to continue going exponential. Like you said earlier, it took 180 years to get to $1 trillion in debt, and now we're at 37 trillion. I mean, it's just like, that's exponential. So Bitcoin is the inverse of that, or like the price will correlate to that. It's perfectly in essence. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's wild, and it's hard to judge in fiat terms, right? So whether it's 450 trillion or 900 trillion, like you don't know. Like you said, it could be $1 billion, but what's the dollar worth, right? So like it's almost impossible to actually judge that, and what it would actually be. So I love that answer. Do you think the the administration, the current administration in America, do you think that they are, they're saying in public, hey, we want a strong dollar. They've been saying it for years. Like we want to, we want America, yeah, like this is strong dollar. We want these things. But then obviously their actions are, the dollar's fallen a ton. They want lower interest rates, all these different things. Do you think that
Yeah.
there is like, they're talking out of both sides of their mouth because, in my eyes, you can't, you start a world war or, just civil unrest everywhere. If you said, hey, yeah, the dollar's dead, that's why we're just bringing this up. It's lost 99% of its purchasing power. It's done, guys. Like the Titanic is going under, and they can't say it out loud, but the actions are there. Like, do you think they're revaluing gold, hard metals, Bitcoin? Like, it seems like in the background, they're trying to do stuff to cross this bridge or set this bridge up and build it so we can get to the other side somehow. Is that how you see it? Like, what do you see when you look at everything that's going on from the administration?
I think it's what you said. They're talking out of both sides of their mouth. Like Trump. I watched a video of Trump saying we need interest rates to go down.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a strong dollar, then who's going to want to transact with them?
Right.
It's very hard to transact, right? If
Mm-hmm.
let's say for example they're going to lose tourism, a lot of
Yep.
Canadians probably aren't going to America
Right.
for tourism because they can't afford it, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
40% more. So anything you buy is going to cost you 40% more in the US now, right? If you have like a meal in Canada is going to cost you $16 Canadian, in the US it'll cost you 16 US, right? So for
Yeah.
Canadians, that $16 US meal is going to cost you 23 Canadian, right? That's
Yep.
crazy. So
Wow. Yeah.
if the dollar gets stronger, the U.S. government loses value. They want. I think that they want to tell people that they want a stronger dollar because they want people to think that the dollar is going to get stronger, and they want them to save in the dollar because they're going to keep spending. If people don't have an incentive to hold on to the dollar, then that spending is going to cost more and more in terms of dollars, right? So they won't be able to consume the same things that they need to. They won't be able to buy the same things that they need to, and at the end of it, that's just going to lead to the U.S. government not being able to to fulfill all of the things that they say that they will.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that it's exactly what you're saying. They want a weaker dollar, but they're saying they want a stronger dollar for, I guess, for the to support the savers. Do you get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Like they
Yeah.
they want to say it so that the
Try to buoy
savers
the
don't
system.
leave.
Yeah.
Right. Like they need to keep
Yeah.
supporting this because it's fragile. Right. Bitcoin is anti-fragile. The system is fragile. If the
Yes.
savers leave, then what value does the dollar have? None.
Absolutely. No, so true.
I think
What?
they want a weaker dollar.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I mean, all their actions are showing it, and then they say
Yep.
one thing because again, you can't have a flight, all of a sudden like a hyperinflation or like an event or a bank run. Like you can't have everyone just like selling their dollars and like, oh wait, what? The president, like this thing's dead or dying. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. Have to they're trying to build this system or aid this system being built, like kind of like again we're bringing everything full circle in essence of like there's a bunch of people in the private world building the system outside of the government. They recognize that, at least in my opinion, with the David Sachs of the world and the Bo Hines and all these different people, even
Yep.
the Trump sons, talk pretty eloquently about it. And I know everyone's got their different opinions on that, but like again, as a Bitcoiner, when you're listening to these people speak, they know it very well. I mean, it would just be like you and I or a bunch of us sitting around Bitcoiners talking, and they can talk just like us. That doesn't come without a lot of work, so like putting that work in, you don't get to that point unless you do believe it, because as we know, and you've
Yep.
been talking about here, you don't get there. You're not a believer. You just kind of lose your way and you're off doing whatever else, if you don't get it. So anyway, it's just a fascinating thing that's going to play out here in the next 4 to 8, 12 years. So,
Yeah.
what do you think the most concerning thing? What's the most concerning thing in the Bitcoin space for you right now? And what's the most hopeful thing you in your mind in the Bitcoin space?
I think the most concerning thing is that people are falling for shitcoins again, right? And
Mm,
they don't have a long enough time horizon to go through Bitcoin's volatility and to understand it. And I think that what that's going to do is it's going to create a foundation. It's going to create a foundation of weak Bitcoiners.
mm,
Do you get what I mean? Like
yep.
if the Bitcoiners are weak, then they fall into any narrative that shitcoiners want to tell them. They'll fall
Yep.
for it and they'll go and buy that shitcoin. That's the problem. I know a lot of people who say that they're Bitcoiners, but they own this other cryptocurrency. I'm not going to mention which one it is, but a lot of them, like you see it on Twitter.
Yeah.
I used to be a Bitcoiner. I was a Bitcoiner, but now I buy Bitcoin and this other cryptocurrency. And there's one
Yes.
specific cryptocurrency that's trying to mask itself as a medium of exchange, while Bitcoin is used as a store of value. Right? That's what they want you to think. But the reality is that they're trying to Trojan horse their way into Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin's trying to Trojan horse its way into the US dollar shitcoin network.
Yep.
While these shitcoins are trying to reverse it, right? They're trying to get back into the Bitcoiner's heart. They're trying to capture the Bitcoiner's mind. And I think that's very concerning to me. The reason why that's very concerning to me is because I think that it's going to lead to a lot of people selling their Bitcoin, buying these random shitcoins. And I've gotten a lot of comments from people saying that, oh no, I sold my Bitcoin and bought this shitcoin because it's supposed to be better. Better technology always wins, bro. Like that's what they say, right? Because they don't quite understand that Bitcoin,
Jeez.
a lot of the bugs in Bitcoin are actually, like, people think that they're bugs, but they're actually features. People say, oh, it's slow. It's supposed to be slow. It's meant to be slow so that everybody on earth can have a record of Bitcoin's transactions. That's why it's slow. But people don't get that. People want faster. They want better technology. They want higher price movements. They want bigger growth. They want more number goes up technology. Like, they have number goes up with Bitcoin, but they want more NGU, which is crazy to me. Like, nothing can compete with Bitcoin. Nothing can outcompete Bitcoin. And I did this debate with somebody. It was posted, I think, 2 or 3 days ago.
Yeah.
And I got a lot of negative reviews. Like, a lot of people thought I was a crackhead, right? Like, they thought I was an idiot, right? If you read the comments, like, you can see, oh, this guy knows nothing. He has no idea what's happening, right? But they clearly didn't listen till the end, right? You have to listen to the conversation until the end to actually understand what's like the point. So a lot of these people probably didn't listen to it till the end, and they just roasted me in the comments. And I'm okay with that. I'm perfectly fine with that, because we're going to see that the market is going to tell them that they made the wrong decision. The way that I see it, nothing can compete with Bitcoin, and that's something that I'm really bullish on. The other side of your answer, nothing can compete with Bitcoin. People will figure this out. If it takes them a year, their loss, right? Maybe Bitcoin's 50% more expensive. If it takes them 10 years, again, their loss. Maybe Bitcoin's 10,000% more expensive at that point. But once they figure it out, they're never going to want to go back, because they've already fallen for the shitcoin traps, and now they're out of them. They don't want to go back into them. So the bad thing here is that we may have, in the short term, very weak Bitcoiners who fall for the shitcoin traps. But over the long term, we're going to see that a lot of those Bitcoiners, or a lot of those shitcoiners,
if you like that episode, then you're going to love the playlist we put together for you with our most recent podcast with the top Bitcoiners, sound money, liberty advocates in the world. Go check those out here. We'll see you inside. You're going to love them.